meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I think this is the last meeting of the calendar year, so thank you for making it. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The agenda has been adopted. Next today is a student, staff, and school recognition. We've got Heritage Elementary School with us today.
Did you want me to present it?
You could do your student recognition first.
Okay. I just meant, do you want me to put the slides up or do you guys?
Oh, I can do it.
Okay, awesome. So, good evening, Superintendent Morlock, members of the board, and members of the Woodburn community. Not sure where I should stand. I think I should stand with that. My name is Sherilyn Rawson, principal at Heritage Elementary School. My assistant principal, Amy Solis, and I are pleased to present staff and students for recognition this evening. Everyone being honored tonight was nominated by other Heritage staff as the best Heritage representatives to exemplify the mission and the core values of the Woodburn School District. So I believe the first slide we have up is the classified staff. Should we do that first?
Yes.
One moment, and yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Right there.
Hey, excellent.
Can I have you stand?
Yep.
Here.
How's that?
I need to get you on camera. That's my.
Oh, tell me where you want me.
Right next to Rachel. Right there. Perfect.
All right. So I'd like to start by honoring classified staff who were nominated by their peers. I don't know if Kathy made it tonight, but I'm going to talk about Rufina first because she's here. Come on up, Rufina. Rufina is in her 20th year in the district. She has long been a member of the facilities and maintenance team at Heritage. This year, she has stepped into a new role as the lead custodian on the Heritage side of the building, and she's done it with the same ease, grace, dedication, and hard work that she's always had, no matter what shift she's on or what role she's played. I don't think I've ever experienced anything from Rufina but a smile and a positive can-do attitude, no matter what task she's handed. We are grateful to have her in her new leadership role in the building. Staff members who nominated Rufina note that she is extremely hardworking, welcoming to all staff and students, and always willing to help. Thank you, Rufina. I'm going to skip Effie in the hopes that she comes.
We have a certificate for her.
Oh, fun. Stay here. We have two classroom teachers who've been nominated, Beatriz Guerrero and Marjuda Rabimov. If you could please stand and be recognized. Beatriz was nominated by everybody in her grade level team. Beatriz is in her 6th year in the district as an EA, then as a sub, then as a classroom teacher. She's very passionate about reaching every student. She has supported students going through very difficult family situations by making them comfortable enough to open up, trust her, and then she advocates for them to ensure they're safe and feel safe. This is what her colleagues noted. Beatriz is a fantastic young teacher. She's overcome many challenges in the few years she's been here. Her first year of teaching was in 2020. The school first went online. Can you imagine your first year as a teacher? Is the pandemic. She was able to not only manage her first year of teaching, but find a way to be successful online. She has a calm demeanor when working with students, which creates an excellent learning environment. She's an excellent member of the 4th grade team. I feel so lucky to have the opportunity to work with her. Beatriz is not only a teacher, but she's also an amazing teacher, colleague, friend, and daughter. She has a passion for students, and teaching is her strength. She appreciates everyone in her classroom and around her. Her effort and daily interaction go beyond her classroom. Beatriz is very patient with students and adults. She always listens to everyone and shows empathy for others. She values language and real world learning. When she speaks, she shows equity and justice to what is right. She deserves to be recognized because she is a reflection of our culture and community. Congratulations, Beatriz.
Thank you.
Mavjuda Rabimov was nominated by many of her colleagues in the Russian strand. Mavjuda is in her 22nd year in the same district and in the same school. She is being recognized by her colleagues for her dedication to students' achievements, as well as for her unlimited care for school and students. She is passionate about her work and advocates for students and teachers alike. From her colleagues, Mrs. Rabimov is always looking for ways to meet her students' needs in the classroom. She is a leader with great ideas in the classroom and in the school at large. She is a mentor that we can count on for her experience to guide us in our teaching. She is an extremely dedicated and excellent teacher. Congratulations, Mavjuda. And we have two other teachers who are licensed staff who were nominated by their colleagues. Anne and Kristen, come on up. Anne McCormick and Kristen Hall.
Where do you want us? Anywhere, wherever you like. Just stay here.
Stay put so we can see you on camera. There we go. This is from colleagues. Anne puts the I in individual for her very special students. She individualizes not only their learning opportunities, but also their daily ways to report and to self-reflect. She is a joy to work with. Colleagues also report, Anne, I'm so impressed at how you put so much time into each student, helping them feel successful. I've learned so much by just watching you. You're amazing. You do amazing work to support me all of the time, but especially during parent conferences. Thank you very much for your support. You are incredible. Thank you. Kristen Hall is in her, I believe, 16th year in the district. Like Anne, Kristen individualizes instruction for her very special students. And like Anne, she is also absolutely a team player. Whenever we are shorthanded, she and Anne work together to come up with creative solutions to make sure every student is safe and well taken care of. She's also creative and problem solver and innovator when it comes to figuring out ways for students to be successful students. Colleagues report that Kristen will try every possible solution to give her students access to grade level content. Kristen is very hardworking, giving her all for some of our students that struggle the most, and she shows up every day to do it. We also had somebody recently thank you for your help with Shop with a Cop. It takes many volunteers to pull off this event, and your help was greatly appreciated. Thank you, Kristen.
We've got little certificates. Take a picture.
Would you? I think they'd like to do you as a group. Yes.
Yeah, you wanna come this way?
Okay. Okay. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Do you want them over here or over there?
This is fine, I'll just stand over here.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't take it. Thanks, Joe. This kind of overlap. Can you go in the back too? Thank you.
Yeah, I know, like, I'll. Keep going back.
Okay, I want to be frank. Okay, 1, 2, 3, one more. Thank you.
So for student recognition, one of our students is unable to come tonight, but the other student is here. We are recognizing Timofey Kryukov tonight, and I'm asking his teacher, Mrs. Rabimov, to stay so that she can translate for him. so that he and his family can understand. Tim is a very intelligent student. He moved from Kyiv, Ukraine just a few months ago, feeling lost and sad. Since that time, he has been slowly recovering and doing his best in all academic areas, math, reading, and writing. His English has improved by 2 levels in such a short time, and he likes to learn English. Every day he asks for books to read in English. He reached 100% of his attendance goal. He has his mother and sister here now, and we feel full support from his family. Education is the main priority from them here in their current country. Timofey Krukov has been recognized as an outstanding heritage student, a 3rd grader of the Russian Slavic Strand.
You just want to join? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. And 1 more. Thank you. That's all.
And for staff and students who were honored tonight but unable to attend, I want to make sure that we read into the record what we wanted to share about our missing comrade. Effie Ballyhoff, in her 25th year in the district, is an assistant secretary at Heritage who truly goes above and beyond for the entire building. She's in many ways the glue that holds us together, whether it is helping out the nutrition services staff with information about student food needs on holy days, or making sure that we get timely information out to staff about absences, or getting all of the information about incoming newly enrolled students, everyone who needs to know. This is for me. She's the first person I talk to at every morning, 6:30, by which time I know that both she and I have checked ASOP, the online absence tracking software, at least 3 times since we got up. She greets students by name with a cheerful and welcoming smile no matter when they arrive. And she's the first one in the office every morning, taking parent calls in 3 languages with ease. Staff members note she's always willing to support everybody. She does her work efficiently, and she's an excellent asset to our school and is also a great team player. She does extra work. Someone says she does extra work for me on short notice, even when she's already so busy. All of my students and I appreciate you, Effie. You are kind and often solve our problems. Huge thanks. And the other student who is going to be honored tonight, unfortunately, is out ill this week with her family, but this is why she was nominated. Aura Gabriel Simon. Aura is a newcomer from Guatemala whose first language is Mam. When she arrived in Woodburn, she had had only 1 year of schooling, enough to know her letters and numbers in Spanish. Since her first day at Heritage, she has embraced school. Within her first 5 to 6 weeks, she was already reading and doing addition and subtraction problems. She loves to draw, read, write, and do math, and is a very hard worker. She always asks for additional work for class and from home. She is truly a passionate and inspired learner.
Yep. Continue. Over here. Report.
I know, I just wanted to do this and this.
No.
All right. So, our school-wide improvement goals include a focus on, where do you want to see them? All right.
Sorry.
We're good. I mean, you're doing fine. Okay. So, good evening again. Our school-wide improvement goals at Heritage include a focus on improved academic performance in math and literacy, improved student attendance, and taking a cue from our superintendent, 100% family engagement. we'd like to share a couple of strategies we're using to work toward achieving these goals. So the first thing I'm going to talk about a little bit is our after-school intervention and enrichment. Like the other elementary schools in the district, we have aligned our after-school intervention and enrichment with our school-wide improvement goals of improving academic achievement and attendance. One of the ways that we've done that is by targeting students who are at the bottom 10% in academic performance in math or in literacy, in English or Spanish or Russian, and who are chronically absent. So students who have 90% attendance or lower. So that's the criteria for who we invited, second through fifth grade. We're currently serving 73 students, which is about 12% of our current enrollment. We're targeting at least 10. And we're doing these in 7-week sessions, 2 35-minute sessions, 2 days a week. And the strategy is to have one intervention session targeting the thing that they're focusing on, whether it's math or literacy, and then one enrichment session, which could be arts, crafts, strategy games. We have one group that's doing art with a cricket machine. So the idea is that sort of the come for the food, stay for the pie, right? Come for the math, stay for the fun stuff. So we're going to be looking at these 7-week sessions, and we're going to be looking at data to see if student attendance improves, and to see if academics improve. So those are the things we're doing there. And the data that we're using, of course, is our attendance, our MAP, our measures of academic progress scores, and in Russian, the BAS/DRA score, which is the measure of Russian reading, since we don't have a MAP test in Russian. So if you would like to pop to the next slide, you can get a couple of pictures. You can see, so the children are, doing math, math intervention, and then you can see some enrichment in games, right? Some of the games are definitely related to the things that they're working on. So playing dominoes, some of them are strategy games, some of them are their turn-taking games, depending on the group that they're in. So in terms of engagement and inspiring, our school improvement goal focused on family engagement. We have activities focused on in-person family engagement now that we're moving back into more normal presence in the school. And so we'd like to focus on a couple of those things. And our first and most basic measurement is family attendance. Who's showing up for these days? So Amy, if you could tell us a little bit about math night.
For sure. So on November 17th, we held our first in-person family event, focused on a specific subject matter. In this case, we did math. This was the first time that we opened doors to parents to come in and engage in academic learning activities. We had staff, teachers, and family come together, celebrate and explore learning through the lens of math at home with at-home accessible materials. We had over 162 heritage families attend.
Yeah, so if you could go back to that other slide, this was the line of parents to get in and kids to get into school for our first in-person event. We weren't sure if people want to come back. Turns out they do. So go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. So we had 162 families total attend. Families were engaged in the math activities. The math activities were relevant to grade level standards. We had at-home extensions for the math activities as well. We provided our families opportunity to take home a basket that had materials that they could use at home to support their students in the learning of math. It also had some fun math games and board games and activities that they could do to practice those skills in a way that kids felt like they were having some fun times with families, and get to also engage family as a whole in their learning process. So we were very pleased to see families engaged and having fun, interacting with our staff, interacting with their kids, sharing a meal. It was a great time.
You make it sound so simple. Sharing a meal. How many pieces did we eat?
We bought a lot of
We had 162 families, I think.
Yeah, so it looks like 150 pizzas or something like that.
Yeah.
So
We were very excited that people were very excited to be back in the building, and we learned that the next time we're going to have to open up the gym and other parts because everybody was super excited to be back. So we were pleased to have them as well.
And they were excited to engage in the learning and be able to take home some new understanding of how math can be just implemented throughout life, and kids get to have fun, families get to spend time together. And so that was just really.
And then the other activity that we were blessed to be able to engage in was our Russian art night. And I was very happy to see Natalia Fektita, could you wave? So, Natasha Fektita really put this together. This was on December 5th. We held our first culturally themed art night. It was organized by Natalia and other parents of students in the Russian Strand, and the event afforded an opportunity for families in the Russian Strand to come together to produce culturally relevant art together with parents, older children, and younger siblings alike joining in the fun. Students engaged in everything from free play for the little ones to a painting class for older students and adults. The attendance that I have is 26 pre-K to first grade students, 22 second through fifth grade students, 13 sixth through eighth grade students, but this does not include all of the parents, teachers, and older students who volunteered to make the event a success, who brought in and served treats, had everything from aprons to Legos and Duplos for the tiny ones, to you name it. It was an amazing, wonderful event, and I think it's a model for how we can put together culturally relevant events for kids and families alike. So, thank you.
Any questions before you escape?
Sure.
With your family night and your kiddos who score low academically,
Mhm.
how do we participate? How do we include those families in the family? How do we know if they attended that?
So the crossover between the people who engaged in this, the students who engage in after-school intervention and enrichment, and our first night, the family math night, I would have to go back and look at the names of the families to let you know how many of those were kids who are engaged in also after-school intervention and enrichment, because the math night was open for K-5 for everybody, and the intervention and enrichment was pretty targeted. But it would be an interesting question to see what the cross-section is, to see if.
And aside from that night, how does your school include these families? How do you engage outside of participating in that?
What are you say
So my
again?
question is, so you have kiddos who perform low academically and don't show up to school. How do you connect with their families outside for this event, such as these?
So we, working with our homeschool contact, have done some home visits. We just outreach outside of the school building to kind of connect with them and support them and find, what those barriers might be to accessing, school regularly. So we're always trying to work with families in that way. Not all families are open to those conversations to have us there, but we do try to find many ways of communicating with them. And so, in writing, through mail, phone calls, emails coming to their home in person. So that's the way that we work to try to engage them and get them back into our building.
Can you also talk to us about enrollment? How's that looking this year?
Enrollment, we're in the low 600s right now. So I'm not sure what every day there's another house popping up across the street, or apartment, or duplex or something. So we are starting to see a few families enrolling from the development, but I would point more to the district's study of projections for enrollment to see what the future was. But right now we're sitting at about 617 or something like that, I think. And that would be 5 classes at each grade level with 1 blended class.
That's more than last year.
It's not, it's similar to what we had last year.
I have a question. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing at your school, and how are you addressing those this year?
I would say part of what all of us are faced with, adults, students, families alike, is we all went through a pretty major upheaval over the last year and a half in how we do school, how we do work, how we do life. And I think that everybody, every individual is navigating their way back onto a path that says, here's how we do school, here's how we do work, here's how we do life. But it's been really hard, and it's been hard on families, it's been hard on kids, it's been hard on staff. I would say probably the kids are the most resilient. I think honestly, one of the biggest challenges is helping everybody to find that balance, because it was a tough road to hoe. So some of the things that we do, we have a wellness team that's working, that's focusing on things to do for staff to help them. Whether it is a crochet class, or whether it is opportunities to, sorry, go ahead. Exercise. Yes, exercise classes coming up with Zumba and what was it, Pilates, I think. Some of those pieces are there for staff. When it comes to parents and families, I think again, Amy's right that we really have to try several different avenues to work with people, whatever works the best. To get back to the engagement question, it wasn't enough to just send notes home to families of kids who were having attendance issues. Again, we had, we made phone calls, we made home visits, and that's a very individualized, what are the barriers for you and what can we do to help support you? That's what I would say. Not the least of which also is that also impacts the academics, right? The academics were impacted when we were away for so long, and everybody's still focused on those grade level standards and figuring out the ways that they're going to scaffold while they still give students access to grade level content.
Thank you.
We've had ESSER fund and Student Success Act investments. What do those dollars look like?
You mean you want to rattle them off, or do you want me to tell you the things?
There's a couple highlights.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, honestly, some of the things that you're seeing here, the math night, the Russian cultural art night, both of those were funded with ESSER funds. We also have the supplemental funds that pay for those kinds of things, also pay for the after school intervention and enrichment. So all of those things are available with grant funds. None of those are coming out of general fund.
And then the final question, can you tell me about challenging behaviors and what kids are displaying and what that looks like in comparison to maybe last year?
I think some of the more challenging behaviors happened last year. It may be hard to think about that when you're thinking about everybody's getting ready for a break, but when you think about last year, we had students, last year we had fewer than half of the students in school who had actually completed a full year of school in person, right? Because we had kids who did part of a year up to March of 2020 and then went home and stayed home for a year and a half. We had kids who stayed home for a year and a half. We had kids who stayed home for a half year. So by the time we got started again, it was only 3rd through 5th grade who had ever done a whole year of school and knew the rhythms of school and what that felt like. So we had 1st grade students last year who didn't know how to line up at the end of recess because they'd never done it, right? And it was hard for kids to recognize those things and at the same time have things like stickers to keep them 3 feet apart where they were seated. And so I would say probably some of the most challenging stuff was initially coming back after having been gone for so long. Other than that, we have the same range of behaviors at school right now that you would expect anywhere else. I do appreciate that we have additional resources. We have, in addition to all of the wonderful folks that we have in student services that we've always had, whether it's a school psychologist, whether it's the counselors, we also have now a school social worker who provides additional support to kids who maybe are having some bigger additional issues outside of school that we can help them to navigate. So those things are helpful.
And then what is suspension look like?
What is it?
I mean, our students-
It's rare, but it happens. If we follow the
we follow the code of conduct and we follow graduated discipline, so there are times when it happens, both for students' own safety and the safety of others. Mhm.
Congratulations on the math night and Russian art night.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun. Looking forward to the next one, and we'll open the gym up.
Okay.
I get more pizza.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Up next, we have public comment. There's Natalia. Sophie's still here today.
Hi, so I wanted to address a comment, about last board meeting where, they had mentioned, some like personnel additions and improvements that had been made to address student needs. So while I don't doubt the validity of the numbers, they also don't really give an accurate depiction of what's actually happening in our classrooms. So one of the points mentioned was that there were assistants added to the classrooms. And that has happened, but at the beginning of the school year, that wasn't true. A month or two ago, I and a group of other parents had to ask and beg and need to have an assistant brought into our children's classroom because there was another child who was making the environment extremely unsafe. There was like chairs being thrown, there were kids that were being choked. It was really crazy. And so when we initially asked to have an assistant brought in, we were told that there were no assistants available to accommodate that need. And so while they're saying that we did have assistants added, it didn't happen at the beginning of the school year. And it was kind of a little too late in our situation. We had to wait and our children were in a very unsafe environment for at least a month or two while they tried to get some sort of like barriers in place. And while the situation has improved, I feel like the principal was put in a very difficult position because she could not pull an assistant from a different area because then other kids would not be safe. But what I'm saying is that that report that was presented at the last board meeting is not necessarily accurate of what is actually happening in our classrooms. The other thing is they pointed out that career exploration class has been added at the middle school level, which is true. But what they didn't mention is that midway through the year, the teacher actually left. So right now they don't even have a teacher in there. They have a substitute in there and it hasn't been the same substitute. So there's been a lot of turnover. And so they're saying they're funneling all this money, all this resources into a career exploration class, which is great, but there's no point if there's no stable teacher to really implement those resources. And then the last thing that they mentioned was that they say that they are adding various pathways for our students. What they didn't mention is that they actually got rid of the one pathway that our Russian students had, which was IB Russian. So currently there is no pathway for our Russian students for next year because they have cut out IB Russian. AP does not have a Russian class for our students. They're currently trying to talk with a university to try to arrange it, but even that at this point, we're not sure if that's going to happen or not. So it sounds great, like we're working on all these pathways, but then we're also cutting out different pathways. But I don't want to sound ungrateful because I know my time is up, but I do want to say thank you because I do realize that the district has made a big effort in trying to engage families, like obviously with art night and everything. Superintendent Morlock has been really great. Sonia Kuhl, Sherilyn Rawson, Peter McDougall. They really listened to our request for what we asked for our art night. And that was great. I just wish that our program and our teachers had that same support that we feel as parents, because it feels like there's a lot done to engage families, But when it comes to supporting our teachers, supporting our program, it's like, no, we're not gonna do that, so. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of give the other side of the report, because the report gives a lot of numbers that look really fabulous. But if you go and look into our classroom, it's not really an accurate representation of what you'll see there. So, thank you.
And up next, we have board action items. Number one, OSBA elections.
Mhm. We have, position, and that's position 12. So there's no candidate for position 11 for OSBA director. There is one candidate for position 12, and then there's a resolution that is being presented to you. And you can just go down each of those, and entertain a motion if there is one. Have discussion. if you need to.
I can read the motion into the record or the document.
Yeah. Oh, the resolution, you mean?
Yeah, the resolution. sorry.
No, you don't.
I move to nominate Phil Grau, the OSBA Board of Directors position 12 as the candidate.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Been moved and seconded to nominate Bill Grub for position 12, OSBA Board of Directors. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. The motion has passed.
I guess I could kind of talk about this one, no one knows the board. So this is the legislative priorities and principles preamble. We've been working on this language for the last year and a half. And then these are some of the priorities going into the 2023 legislative session to focus on, first and foremost, the stable funding for public education in the state of Oregon. And like we'll also talk about earlier, protecting dollars from the student success act that go to supporting our students with the classroom learning. This was put together by the legislative policy committee, made up of board members from across the state of Oregon.
The motion.
We are in so few days as you see.
I'll go ahead and motion that we adopt the proposed OSBA legislative priorities and principles.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? And all those in favor say aye. Aye. The motion has passed. OSBA legislative priorities and principles have been adopted. So item 2 today is the recommendation to approve resolution 22014. Authorize superintendent to enter into real estate transactions to lease property. And Bill, you're gonna first.
Sure, yeah, so we have, as it mentions here, the property near to this building that we're interested in leasing the office space. Um, It's not quite adjacent, but it's close to adjacent. As you heard in the SIA report, we have hired social workers, behavior specialists, autism specialists, and additional mentors. We have people essentially sitting in spaces that are in closets and other, and if you've been through the office, you've seen those things. So we're looking to lease a space. It has 2 meeting rooms as well, but we will be used as these are our only meeting spaces for the district at the school. And so we're working with them to try to lease that space. Since it's close by, provide some support and some space for some of our people to be. And then as we grow toward, and we're working on significant supports for mental health for students and families and those kinds of things, we'll have additional space to be able to put people. So that's why we're looking into doing that. So this resolution would authorize me to move forward doing that. So we can get into that space if necessary, if possible.
So this space is.
No, it's not the brown building, but the gray building next to it. So our bus lane that comes through the middle of the 2 gray buildings. As you come in by the,
That's where options counseling was.
yeah, for options council, yeah, they've moved out. Yeah,
Okay.
right.
So how would that be funded?
Through general fund. Yeah, yeah, we normally do through general fund.
And do we have a price for that?
That's part of the negotiation. Generally, if you're looking commercial property like that, you're somewhere between $1 a square foot to $1.75 a square foot. Depends on those kind of spaces. I assume we'll land at about $1.50 a square foot. It's about 4,000 square feet, but we don't have a final number until we finalize.
Just because we did this a couple years ago, almost on the same property, I think, it's a discussion with the owners. And I just trying to remember steps. So we would have a resolution to then direct you as superintendent to enter into the negotiations. I remember at one point we had a realtor come in and talk to us about the process.
Were you
Yeah, then-
purchasing or leasing?
It was conversations to purchase, and I
Right.
think the conversations fell through.
Right, that would
Would you
be,
then come back with a dollar amount, or is this the one and only time?
this would be the one and only time.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah. Yeah, this would authorize me to do that. So that would be, it's in that range. Let's say it's somewhere between, as I said before, it's about 4,000 square feet. So let's say about 6,000 a month-ish.
Gotcha.
And this
So it's
would
not
be,
purchasing, sorry.
No, it's not purchasing. It is a lease only.
and this would be, for how many staff? I mean, how many staff would we have there?
At least a dozen. I don't remember all the folks we've got in there, but and we may need some temporary space for some tech people as we move. We have to do some work in the tech building because of physical space and some issues over there with maintenance and technology. So, and our nutrition staff, we would be shifting some people. We could use the space.
Just for reference, Joe, what square footage do we have here?
I don't know. Let's see, 10, 20, 40. Well, so a classroom is about 9,000 square feet, right? So if we can try to see if we can estimate from that, so 9, 18, 27, 36 for probably 8,000 square feet here, yeah.
So 1.5 times the capacity.
Yeah.
With the lease space. How long do you plan to hold that for?
3 years, yeah. And only has an extension for one. I'm not sure that we may need it beyond that, but that was something that district was interested in purchasing. Both that property and the one, it's all one property, but we have an easement through the middle of it for our school bus. Yeah, so it provides some parking for Success as well. That's the other thing is that we have quite a bit of parking because we have more students coming to Success, so they'll be able to use additional parts of that whole lot along there, which some of them already do, but they're not supposed to.
So what we provide that space, is that space for 3 years.
Well, we would either try to extend that lease or we'd have to find a different solution.
Does anyone recall why the conversations fell last year?
From what I remember, the owner of the property was working with a realtor with the district. And they were, yes, I want to sell it. No, I don't want to sell it. They want more than, they were asking for more than what they had originally agreed on. It's really wishy-washy. Yeah.
That's what I've heard, but I don't know much more than that. They're willing to lease at least for now, and that may be something in the
It's
future
really
that a
locked
future
into a
board.
contract where before we were almost ready to go forward and then make that.
Right.
Hopefully we can lock it into a clear contract.
Yeah.
Give staff some space. And then, I move to approve resolution number 22-014.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. It's been approved and approved resolution 22-014. We need to sign something.
Yeah, oh, we can send that.
Up next, we're gonna move into a work session. We're gonna continue the superintendent board transition program that we started last meeting with Janet Avila Medina with OSBA. How's everyone feeling? Do we need a break or do we want to just keep going? Good, okay.
All right. Hello, again, good to see you all, especially those who I know were on virtual, so thank you. I'm glad you're feeling better to be here tonight. Today is going to be session number 2. I have until, I was gonna say until 8:30, but 8:45 is definitely the hard stop. So we're gonna try and finish off the transition plan and kind of the focus areas. Before I do start, did everybody have a copy of the board operating agreement and a timeline sample? You should each have a copy of that. Okay, great.
No, but they will.
They will. Okay, awesome. They will. You don't need it now, but I just wanted to make sure that you have that. So you don't need to read through it right now. We're gonna have time to walk through it.
Yeah, there's.
You get this, you get this, you get this. I got it.
Okay.
You get all 3 things.
Okay. And again, you don't have to flip through that right now. You're gonna have time to work. It's a work session, so I'm gonna make you work. No worries, we'll walk through it and I'll make sure we're on the right page. I'm sure I'll have a copy as well, so I can reference it for you all. Okay, so just very briefly, last time we talked a lot about your role and responsibilities and the relationship with the superintendent, because
Reason for the transition program, it's intended for when you have a new superintendent, you want to make sure you maintain that relationship and you start developing a really good relationship. And we talked a lot about that, so I'm not going to discuss it any further because that's what really we did last time. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on the other areas that we didn't get to, but specifically the superintendent evaluation system, because part of that transition program is making sure you have a superintendent evaluation process and timeline, which you have a sample here. We're going to walk through it in a moment. But I really want to make sure that you have something set in place so that you can set yourself up for success. And again, maintaining that relationship with your superintendent, and that's your job. That's one of the critical roles of you as a superintendent. You get to hire, the board, you get to hire the superintendent. And so you need to hold the system accountable and do a superintendent evaluation every year. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll end with setting some clear expectations. We probably won't get to a board operating agreement based on time, but I am going to at least walk you through how to develop that so you can then do it at your next work session. Or if you like, you can always contract with us again, and I'm happy to come and facilitate that process. But I definitely want to set you up for success after I leave. So let's dive into the superintendent evaluation workbook. How many of you have seen our workbook? Have seen this? Okay. So this is a workbook that we developed with COSA, the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators. A lot of boards adopt this workbook to help them in their process of the superintendent evaluation. I will send you the link. I believe I shared it with Jenny, so she'll share it with you afterwards. I'm going to be diving into some pieces, but if there's any further questions, look at this workbook and poke around in it. It has a lot of more detailed stuff, but I am going to be giving you essentially an overview of it tonight. So really, when it comes to the superintendent evaluation, a couple recommendations. First, every year, you want to do this every year with the board and with the superintendent. You want to review your policy for your superintendent evaluation. It's policy CBG. And then you also want to review the superintendent contract, because you want to make sure before you start developing a timeline that you know what your deadline is for the superintendent evaluation. Typically, we recommend that you complete a superintendent evaluation by March 15th. However, sometimes contracts will have a different deadline. Yours, for example, has June 30th, I believe. And so some boards, I just worked with one recently, and they had an April 1st deadline. So that's why we say pay attention to and review what your policy and your contract state. Sometimes even a board superintendent operating agreement, which we're going to develop tonight, might even have some of that information as well. So those are the kind of things you want to look at when you start having this conversation with the board of what's their superintendent evaluation system going to look like. Then you want to decide on what tool you're going to adopt. And the board has to adopt an evaluation tool. They'll have a discussion or a document. They can adopt our workbook, the document I showed you at the beginning that we developed with COSA, or you can develop your own. But if you do decide to adopt our evaluation toolbook that a lot of boards utilize, it is based on a 5-part steps, and we're going to walk through those 5 parts. And then once you do that, the board will need to approve the process and the timeline. And so this all needs to be done in open session. The board will have to discuss all of this and kind of agree to, okay, this is the criteria. These are the steps we want to evaluate the superintendent on, the standards. I'm going to walk through that here in a moment. And this is the timeline, how we're going to make sure we meet that deadline each year. And so again, we want to make sure you do that every year. So I'm going to walk you through on page 4 in the evaluation workbook. There's more detailed information about each of the steps. We're going to walk through each of the 5-part steps. If you decide to adopt our workbook, this is what it would look like. So part 1 is the standards. You want to evaluate the superintendent on standards. And in our workbook, there's 8 that we recommend you evaluate the performance of the superintendent on. Each of those standards have descriptors to kind of help you understand what does that look like when you're rating the superintendent on their performance. And so essentially, so there's 8, and we definitely recommend, especially even for first year. Sometimes I get the question, what about for a first year superintendent? Do we need to do all 8? We do recommend all 8, although sometimes some boards, again, that's something you have to decide together in open session. If you want to prioritize specific standards, because maybe it's the first year superintendent, like in your case. But all of them are great. And some of them you'll get more insight as a board. You have direct knowledge into how to rate the performance. Some you may need some external knowledge. And so you may want to do a targeted feedback survey, which is part of our toolbook, and I'll get to that in a moment. So when it comes to the evaluation, each board member will get to do, if you use our workbook, has to do their own evaluation of the superintendent. So you, based on your own observations, the connections or what you've seen the superintendent do, get to do a rating 1 through 4, and then there's a comment box for you to put a comment. Typically, what I recommend for boards is in the comment section, set some parameters, make it, make sure that the comments align with your rating, and provide maybe 1 to 2 or 3 specific examples as to why you think this is the rating that the superintendent should be getting in or on this specific standard. And you would do that for all 8 standards. So, and it's based on four ratings in our workbook. So once you each individually do it, what we usually recommend is that the board secretary compile all of your individual scores and comments and put it into one big doc. Sometimes boards will do it into this kind of Word doc. I share this with the board secretary, and she'll put all of your board ratings, depending on how many board members you have. You'll have 5, columns in your case, and then all of your comments. And so this can get very long. And so that's how we say, set some parameters around being specific, around focusing on areas of strength and areas of growth when you are writing your comments. I did recently develop a newer template. I was working with the board, and they were like, is there any way we can make this a bit more, efficient for our time? So I developed an Excel kind of format, so that way you can just put all of the comments and the ratings, and then the rating key is there, so you can just kind of remember what does each rating mean, and then also remind folks in the comments to provide specific examples, focus on strengths and growth. So once you have all of those, once Jenny has compiled, let's say, all of those individual scores and ratings, you'll get a copy of that, and you'll get to discuss in the superintendent, in executive session as a board, your individual ratings and come to a consensus, which is ultimately called a summative evaluation of the superintendent. And it's going to be 1 rating and 1 comment that reflects that rating. And that's what gets submitted to the superintendent and becomes a part of the personnel folder. And it's really important that in that discussion, you agree to a rating. You don't want to do averages. You don't want to do decimals. You want to just make sure you agree, you come to a consensus, you speak with one voice. And so that's really what that process is like. Sometimes it can be facilitated. I've facilitated quite a few. It's up to the board. Again, you get to decide that process in open session. And that's how we say start as soon as possible having that discussion. And I'll show you kind of some key dates for that.
Is it that we get to decide the process or the superintendent?
You as a board.
I thought they could choose if they want an evaluation in public or.
So the process in terms of criteria, you as a board and the superintendent will be there as well, of course, is something the board gets to adopt and decide. So the process, the timeline. Now you're right. If the superintendent decides they want to have their evaluation in open session, they can. So typically, we've seen it done in executive session, but I have done some evaluations and the discussions in open session. It is up to the superintendent to decide. And that's why your timeline is really important, because the superintendent can see when their evaluation is going to be, because you want to give enough notice. And so, yeah, ultimately, Joe could say, I wanted an open session. So, yeah, absolutely right. But in terms of criteria, which standards, the timeline, that's something that the board needs to adopt and approve. So, great question. So the other piece, so that's the summative evaluation, and that's kind of how you get to that. The other piece too is superintendent goals. For first-year superintendents, this isn't a common practice because you haven't had much time, and usually superintendent goals are developed after an evaluation is complete, because then you can create some goals tied specifically to professional development and to the areas that you saw need some improvement in the evaluation. So usually after the evaluation, this is when I recommend the board to have a conversation with the superintendent to create some goals. What do you want to see, and have it be more tied to professional development? It's not the district strategic goals, but it can align. So that's just something I want to emphasize, because usually when I do superintendent evaluations, I see a lot of times that it's the district strategic goals, and that's not what you really want to do. You want to make sure it's based on kind of the evaluation the year prior and seeing how that's improved. That's how your goals should be developed.
So, sorry, if I
Yeah.
go to Riley, would there be any goals this year?
Unless you develop them, and you said you want, and that's why you have to have this conversation. Once the first evaluation is done, have a conversation of what the criteria is going to be. So if you've already developed some superintendent goals, great. But my assumption is you have
So then, are we evaluating on that?
the standards. Yep. Mhm. Correct. Unless you want to develop some, but I would say this late, given that you have until June to create goals. You could have a discussion about it. And let me talk to you here in a moment and how you can tie it maybe with artifacts. It's a good question, but really, I just want to make sure you don't use the district strategic goals as the superintendent goals, because that's not really tied to the professional development. If you do have goals similar to how you rate the standards, you would also rate the goals. And usually we recommend no more than 2 or 3 superintendent goals, and you would have a comment to reflect your rating. So similar process, it would get compiled and you would have a discussion during the evaluation in executive session or open session if the superintendent decides to have it in open session, come to a consensus of the ratings. So part 3 is, so the board gets to do their own self-evaluation, right, based on their observations and their direct knowledge. But the superintendent also gets to do their own self-evaluation, and they present that before you go into executive session. And that's based on, and this is something that I would recommend you agree, because on what kind of artifacts, setting some clear expectations, have a conversation with Joe around what is it that we are hoping to see when we do your evaluation. What kind of artifacts can Joe present? For first year superintendents, there's not going to be, it could be just a lot of conversations. Joe is, probably working with the district leadership team. I won't speak for you, Joe, but working with the district leadership team meetings. I know you're working on a strategic planning process right now and vetting all of that. So he could present steps on that and what other conversations he's had with, folks at the district level. He can kind of show those kind of things, but you as a board and superintendent need to kind of set those expectations at the beginning of the cycle. And usually that happens in April through August at the latest. So that way you are preparing yourself, and Joe can start preparing himself as well for the evaluation. Because really what you want to avoid is nobody likes surprises, and you want to make sure there's no surprises and that you're constantly checking in. And I'll talk about that. Check-in meetings is also something we encourage and strongly recommend. Is throughout the year, once you've already adopted your process, you've adopted the tool you're going to use, you know which standards, if you're going to have superintendent goals, that you are checking in with your superintendent at least quarterly throughout the year before the evaluation, to just check in on how's it going, artifacts. Maybe you can talk about artifacts. Joe can maybe say, I was going to focus on this, but just be aware we're having some delays for X, Y, and Z. I'm going to be focusing more on this area of the strategic plan. So I'm going to be presenting artifacts on this, and having a conversation with the board so that you're in agreement and you're not surprised as to why did you stop working on that strategic goal, things like that. So just to give you some context of why it's important to have those expectations and have a system in place. So in our workbook, we have a lot of examples of what artifacts can look like on page 25 for each specific standard. I'm not saying that Joe needs to have all of these artifacts in his evaluation. He would need to kind of prioritize. And again, my recommendation would be have a conversation with you as a board, maybe in January, schedule a check-in meeting. It can be just very informal meeting to just kind of set some expectations on, what kind of artifacts do we expect to see? What are some examples what do you want to see in terms of the performance of the superintendent when you evaluate? What's going to help you with the overall evaluation? Part 4 of our workbook is optional, and it is the targeted feedback survey. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some standards where you're going to be able to have some really direct knowledge and observations, but there may be some standards where you may not have a ton of insight or information on. So this is where a targeted feedback survey can be very, very useful for boards and valuable. Because again, you want to decide though, if you're going to do this at the beginning of the cycle, you get to determine what standards you're going to survey participants on. This is a separate service that we provide, and it's called targeted because you get to decide with the superintendent who's going to take the survey, what internal stakeholders, folks at the district level, will be taking the survey, and then external. Who do you think? So parents, community members need to be a part of this survey. The survey is tied to the standards. The questions are also tailored to each audience. And so we administer the survey, we take care of all that, and then we present to you as a board right after Joe gives his self-evaluation and before you jump in to have your discussion on the evaluation of Joe's performance. You'll get the results of the targeted feedback survey. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that each part is done kind of on its own, but it helps you with the overall summative evaluation. And so sometimes I get told like, well, we don't have any direct knowledge into that standard, and this is a way to kind of get some further information around the performance of Joe. And it's targeted, and we would help you facilitate and come up with that list because you want to make sure whoever you're selecting has had direct contact with Joe, has been working with Joe throughout the year. So that's why it's really targeted. It's not just a big sample and we kind of decide together what's a good enough number of participants that's going to provide enough data. And that is 2 sessions. Well, it's technically just 1 because we have a planning meeting and that's where OSBA consultant will facilitate an open session and help you kind of determine who's going to take the survey, what standards are you going to select, because we just have you prioritize through the 4 standards. And then the results are given to you in executive session right before or after Joe does the self-evaluation. Part 5, once you've completed and you've approved in open session, because yes, you can have your superintendent evaluation in executive session unless it is requested to be an open session. You have to approve the final document in open session. You have to come out of executive session and approve it and vote on it. And then it gets stored into Joe's personnel folder. The evaluation summary is something separate that the board can do. And this is great to be read at a board meeting to kind of show to the community that you did an evaluation. It doesn't have to be super detailed. It can just say, we did an evaluation on all 8 standards. And, you know, Joe did an outstanding job, or the superintendent did an outstanding job attaining his goals and the standards, but we'll be focusing on these areas for the next school year. Something like that. It's just a great way to let the community know how you're holding the system accountable and how you're holding the performance of the superintendent accountable. Any questions about any of those individual steps?
Who writes the summary?
Typically, it can get designated for the chair to do it, and then the chair will read it out loud.
How long has the TFS been happening for? Is that fairly new, or is it?
It is a little new, not too new since I believe it's on its 3rd year now. It all has been done virtually, and 2020 is when we started. The targeted feedback survey replaced our 360 survey. It just, we found it more valuable to make it targeted instead of just a general big survey where essentially the board could potentially cherry select, you know, who to take it and how to look at the data. And that's why we administer it. And that's why you don't get to see the questions, but you do know that they're tied to the standards and that they're tailored to each audience. And we really focus on a summary of the results, showing you kind of what we saw in the data you know, these are the areas of growth. These are the areas of strength of the superintendent that we saw. We focus on big means when we get the results, but it has been very valuable. All the boards that I've done it with have enjoyed it so far. It's been receiving good feedback.
So if we wanted to do that, when would we need to notify OSBA?
as soon as possible. I mean, if you want to do that, that's kind of the piece of the criteria that you as a board need to discuss and decide. We want to do a targeted feedback survey. I usually don't see a targeted feedback survey in a first year for superintendents, but it's up to the board. The board can discuss it and say, you know, it'd be helpful. But for first year superintendents, I usually don't see it as a common practice.
For year two though, like, would it be like in the summer or,
A targeted feedback
Well,
survey?
just notifying OSBA and
Oh, as soon as you know and it's been adopted that the board wants that to be a part of the criteria, contact OSBA, and then we would schedule based on availability a consultant, a board specialist for you. Yep.
and is there a fee tag to it?
There is a fee tied to it, yes. And it just kind of varies if the board wants it virtual versus in person. So all of that can kind of fluctuate, but we can provide a proposal and we can also provide, you know, service agreement for the board for the, a proposal, and then the service agreement goes to the superintendent to sign. Yep. But yeah, that's why, great point. And that's why we say, have this conversation as soon as you're done, as soon as possible, so that you can plan what kind of criteria you want, and so that you have your process and timeline in place. What we don't want you to do is rush it and be working on it, you know, realizing, oh, we need to do a superintendent evaluation. So the process, you know, I kind of walked you through all the steps. Really, the pre-evaluation, which depending on when your evaluation is due. So you're due in June. So you probably, yours would look a little different. This is if your evaluation results were due by March 15. Since yours is due in June, you have a little bit more of flexibility. So your pre-evaluation, I would just have that conversation July through September, maybe even a little bit October, but no later, definitely than October. Have that conversation of what criteria do you as a board want to adopt? What tool do you want to utilize for the superintendent evaluation? And then schedule a timeline for when it's going to take place. Check-in meetings. Again, this is for March, so for you, it's going to look a little different, but usually just as long as they're quarterly. If it was due in March, we recommend July, October, and January. For June, I'd probably say like September, January, and March would probably be some good deadlines. And then gathering information, that's just making sure that, you know, the superintendent has enough time to gather all the artifacts and get prepared and for the evaluation deadline.
Can we pause there just for 1 second?
Yeah.
So, and I see the next, this is the one you're bringing up next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So because the March 15 is an interesting thing, that's when we usually let all staff know if we're extending a contract or not, right? So that is totally different. Is that true in my contract or not?
Well, that depends.
It's not written in the contract, so I didn't know if my contract is separate from the March 15 deadline or not.
That would be something we'd want to get legal counsel advice on. But this is definitely the recommended, and that's a good point. And if it's not in your contract, that might be, you know, something to discuss with legal counsel.
Right. There's no
just to
date
make
in there,
sure.
so I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Because I know March 15 is something we have to let all,
Mhm.
every other employee except for I think myself,
Okay.
in there. And so I just want to, and that's a law. So I don't know if that law applies to me or not. So that's something that we'll have
Okay.
to find out. because
That's good to
that may
know, though.
change that may shorten our timeline.
That may shorten your timeline, correct? So maybe you are going to be on this March
Yeah, I
deadline.
don't know. But
Yeah,
because
okay.
it does say June 30th in the
Yeah.
evaluation to be completed by, but I just don't know if there's
Okay.
it would make more sense to complete an evaluation before you extended or not extended a contract. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Or maybe you can.
Yeah.
check in and let-
Yeah, I'll check in on that.
But that would
with
make
our-
a difference.
Yeah. Great. Good to know. So that's why we say start, you know, looking first at your contract. So given that, this is a sample of a timeline of kind of basically showing you where all those steps really kind of will look like. So just giving you a better picture of kind of everything I just said. But typically, you know, again, you want to review that evaluation process. So you're in step one, right? You still haven't had a discussion around what process, what tool you want to adopt. So my recommendation would be at your next board meeting, which is in January, having that be your priority is as a board approving your process, what tool you're going to utilize, I'm happy to, we'll go back and look at the contract and make sure if either you're a March 15 deadline or you're a June, if you do have a little bit of wiggle room. And then kind of, I can go back and give you some recommendations for deadlines. So that will be something we need to identify before you can even determine your calendar to set dates.
But if it's a 3-year contract, then the March 15 wouldn't be effective until 2024, right? So we're not talking about March on an annual basis. We're talking about March.
For the evaluation, yeah.
Which is every year.
Yeah. Mhm.
So say your question again.
Because isn't the March deadline that y'all are talking about that you mentioned, that's for if the contract isn't going to be renewed, it's not the evaluation timeline.
Oh, until the
renewal.
last year of your contract, so you're the last year
Could
of your
be, yeah,
contract.
some places they'll extend a new contract for 3 years, so it becomes a rolling 3-year, and other places wait until the end of the 3 years to do it. Either way,
Yeah, because it wouldn't make sense for yours to have a renewal annually when it's a 3-year contract.
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm saying, some places do that process where they'll extend a new 3-year contract, and they'll do it every year as a rolling 3-year.
Like the year before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
so every year becomes a new 3-year.
but I think you're right. I think it's not until the last year that you have to decide the contract renewal, but I think Joe is just saying, let's just double check on it because it's nowhere stated in the contract. It doesn't state like,
It wouldn't be in the contract. It'd be most likely COSA or legal counsel.
Yep.
giving us,
yeah.
Is that what they're trying to find out?
Correct.
Yeah. If it's a renewal each year, if it's a renewal for the 3-year contract. Yeah. Okay. So if it is a March 15th, this would definitely be the timeline that we would recommend. Now, if it's a June, you have a little bit of more flexibility and we can probably pick some different dates. We will pick different dates for that. And I'm happy to provide a sample of kind of, we can walk through it too, but it's going to be hard to know until we have that piece figured out if you're at if it's the 3-year renewal or I'm pretty sure it is going to be at the last year where you have the contract renewal conversation.
You only, like you said, you wait for the last year, but you still have an evaluation.
Oh, absolutely.
So-
Yes. Every year you want to have an evaluation of the superintendent. Yes, absolutely. Good question. So let's walk through this and I guess pretend or that it is due in March. So if it was due in March, again, your first step would be to review the process, the standards, your timeline, and have that in open session. So at your next board meeting, when's your next board meeting?
Our regular,
Mhm.
January 20.
24.
January 24th. So you may even want to have a special meeting because that's kind of late, January 24th. It was like earlier in January. But again, we'll have to see if it's not until June, you're going to be good. If it's in March that you have to do that, then you're going to be cutting it close, but you are going to be able to still complete it. And I have seen boards do it quickly. So don't want you to but for next year, definitely start. This is why we want to have this transition program. And I know we have to kind of wait to reschedule, but you want to start the process, early on, by at least August. Then you would want to decide if you want to review and approve, superintendent goals, which I think in your case, you're not going to have any superintendent goals unless you want something created by the next board meeting. So I don't know, that's a discussion that you need to kind of have with the board, is if you want to have superintendent goals. I don't recommend it this late in the game. And it is a first-year superintendent. Like I mentioned, if you look at the bottom of this timeline where it says superintendent board will set evaluation superintendent goals for upcoming year, it's usually done right after the evaluation. So that way you can use the evaluation results to create those superintendent goals. Or Joe can create the superintendent goals.
So what do we use, if we're not evaluating, what are we doing tomorrow?
Between now and the next board meeting, we need to identify the contract and make sure if your deadline is either March or June. And then have a timeline to reflect the deadline and have you as a board approve the timeline at your next meeting. Approve the timeline and approve your process.
I think you might be asking about what would you use for evaluation criteria?
Tool.
Right, so which tool would you use in either timeline, right? Before we get to a place where we would have superintendent goals. Yeah, so that's back to what we were talking about for the 8 standard areas.
The 8 standards.
So this is planning for the next year, right? Like this is like.
This is planning for the evaluation in March. 2023 is when you, if it's either in March or June. So you need to have an evaluation each year. So this is for either it's going to be in March or June, and we're going to identify that and then create a timeline for you based on either if it's going to be in March or June. But you have to have one done.
This first one will look different. That
Yep.
would be the one that doesn't have the goals. Use the 8 areas.
Yep.
Then identify what those areas of improvement might be for setting the goals for the following year. So
Yes.
whether we finish it in March or June, it doesn't actually matter.
Yep.
In August, then we would set those
Superintendent
priorities and
goals.
say, here are the areas, here are 2 goals out of the 8 areas. Here are 2 areas we'd like you to focus on.
Yes.
And then that becomes the goals that go along, and you still use the 8 areas
Yes.
for the following year.
Yep.
And then whatever kind of,
Other criteria like the targeted feedback survey.
right, so we'll use the target feedback survey and whatever kinds of artifacts that
Yes.
that you want to see. So I'll present artifacts this year. It may be too many, it may be too few, it may be not what you want to see. So that could also go into the expectations in August. Say, okay, so for this one, 2 goals related to the 8 areas, and then we can get ones. But this one is a compressed, so we just use the 8 areas, and then go from there.
Yeah, and even then, instead of you saying like, I'm gonna present a little troop view, you could have that conversation at your next meeting is like, what do you as a board want to see as kind of evidence of performance from the superintendent? So that way, you know, kind of what to bring to the evaluation instead of having to assume and kind of pick, that way it aligns. That would be my recommendation. So that way you have clear expectations on kind of, for your first year at least, what kind of artifacts do you as a board, you know, expect to see at the evaluation? That would be my recommendation. And it's, again, those are called the check-in meetings, which you see here as the 3rd line. So we're going to skip, you're not going to have superintendent goals this year, but for the next cycle, definitely you can have them, and you'll have that discussion after you complete the first evaluation. The check-in meetings that you see here in the third row, that's where you could discuss kind of expectations for the artifacts. And typically those should occur again quarterly, July, October, and January, if you're meeting that March deadline. So you could, I would even say, have a check-in meeting, even if it is due in March, just to have a conversation around what artifacts you're expecting. I personally, that's what I would recommend, but up to you as a board to kind of decide that. Then the board self-evaluations, you want to set a deadline for that when you're going to complete your own self-evaluations of the standards for this cycle. You would just be doing the standards. You would set, you know, a deadline for that for when you're going to send them to Jenny so she can compile all of your ratings and comments. And that's usually done in February. And then you'll pick a date to go into executive session or open session. You'll pick a date for the board, and that's where the superintendent will present their self-evaluation. So now we're on the 5th row here. Superintendent would then present their own self-evaluation and their artifacts, so their evidence of performance. And then you're going to skip this piece, the TFS summary results, but that's when the consultant would come and give you the results of the summary of the survey. And then the superintendent would then exit the room if you're doing an executive session. And then board members would discuss their individual evaluation. So now you've heard the superintendent's evaluation, you've seen the targeted feedback survey. Now you're going to dive into your discussion around what you think should be the overall rating and comment to reflect that rating. And that's called the summative evaluation. That then gets presented. So then there's a draft that gets created into one. So then you just have one document with one rating because you're coming to a consensus and a comment. And that gets presented to the superintendent. They receive a draft essentially of that summative evaluation. So they have some time to digest and look through it. Then you select another date, and this is where it's called the board. So once the board chair presents that draft to Joe, the board and superintendent need to discuss and clarify that draft summary report. So then Joe can come into executive session and essentially be like, you know, can you clarify why you gave me this rating, or, you know, give me some examples. Not all the time, but it can sometimes, you know, sometimes there may not be any comments, but usually it's just a good opportunity for Joe to advocate for himself and for the board too, to hear if there's any additional information that maybe got missed. And just have a conversation. Joe would then exit, the board would then decide based on what they heard from Joe, if they want to make any changes, and then get out of executive session and approve the final summative evaluation. So, and then after that, notify of the contract extension if applicable, which is usually when the last year of the contract, and board and superintendent then start discussing the next cycle, and you just continue it. So essentially, you know, kind of what you see here, it's a cyclical process and you just start it over. And once you do it once, you know, you'll have your system in place and you'll just review it each year. You still want to review your process because sometimes you may add additional things like the targeted feedback. Maybe your criteria is going to change. Maybe your deadlines are going to change. Your timeline is going to look a little different. So that's what we always encourage, having a conversation and starting the process each year, and the board discussing all of those areas that I talked about at the beginning, which is criteria, standards, what tool you're going to even use, and then your timeline. Any questions?
Between now and our next meeting, as the board, we should each probably familiarize ourselves with the standards and all that information included in the workbook.
Yeah, so the board book, if you decide, sorry, not the board book, the superintendent evaluation workbook, I sent a separate link to Jenny that she can share with you. That's our online PDF form. Yeah, take a look at that tool book and see if it is, you know, going to work for the board, if the board wants to utilize our workbook. Again, you get to decide what tool to adopt.
And that's where we'll find the 8 standards.
Yep. Yep, and they're national standards. Yep, so
Then we'll come in January and share like what each one of us thinks we should hold for the evaluation and come up with the plan for that.
yeah, I would at your board meeting, you know, have some
work
kind of
session that month too.
give a work session.
Before the 10th.
I would definitely have that be an action item for the board to decide. You know, we're going to use OSBA's workbook that they developed with COSA. We're going to have our, you know, for this first year, we want them to facilitate it and make all those decisions at that meeting. Yep. Then you would contact us and we would try to figure out how to schedule based on our availability. Yep. And that would definitely be my recommendation, which I say here, you know, approve your process standards and timeline at your January board meeting. I would recommend to skip superintendent goals and the target feedback survey, and then possibly at least have one check-in meeting or just a conversation with Joe around what are your expectations for artifacts, you know. Any questions?
I'm gonna just throw it out there. I personally like having goals. I know it's the first year, so it's kind of difficult to kind of base goals off of something, but I don't know, if Joe would be open to like maybe setting one goal for the first year, just as a, just feels odd working on a whole year without any goals, but I'm open to hearing other thoughts
Mm-hmm.
on that. I do get that it's late and.
Yeah.
So,
Also my take on it is the goals are based on, that 1 year review, basically. And so what growth from the work that you've shown in that first year, what goals can we set to then improve upon that? So that's why I was taking it fairly and especially if we are, and if it does turn out to be a March date when we have to do the surveys, I'd be very well meeting the goals for next year or the next cycle.
I guess my thought on it, is, when we hire an executive to lead the district, part of that expectation is for them to come into the organization, kind of get a feel for what's going on, and if they're making goals before doing that assessment of like, what should a goal be in this organization? It's kind of chicken before the egg. I think it's fine this year without a goal, and then they'll then have 9, 10 months, whatever, to say, okay, I've seen the organization, I've seen the structure, personnel, etc. I've seen its community. I'm ready to say what the goals should be.
And also the criteria will be some room to evaluate. So what have you seen in EA criteria evaluation piece? So it's pretty broad. It also has like a specific areas that you might want to evaluate about our superintendent. So I don't think we're gonna be short. We don't have goals this year because we will have an abundance of how to evaluate the work that we have seen for the first year. But after you see the link that we will be able to review, you will have a better idea of like, oh, okay, we have room to work from or area to work from. So it's I heard it's a standard that we use nationally, but maybe it doesn't work for the 8 areas, doesn't work for the criteria, doesn't work for the work that we're doing here, but maybe it does. So it has the different areas. And we work one year, we worked with criteria, didn't we?
Use the workbook. We've
Yeah,
used it before.
You've used it before.
Yeah,
The standards.
We did have an old one, this one got developed in 2020, yeah.
Yeah,
But it still had standards too.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it still has standards. I think the only difference is that instead of a 360 survey, we have a TFS, a targeted feedback survey.
Yeah. So we use some of the criteria from the book prior. You were here, right? You were already here the first year we did it with. We did the evaluation of the year. I mean, we did every year, but I remember that one clearly because, yeah. I don't have any stuff. They don't have any.
I guess I would ask, as a facilitator, Joe, what's your input in terms of your superintendent goals? Because they're your goals. How do you feel about first year?
Well, of course I have goals,
Mhm.
but goals in life, but I think it's important I think it's important to build those goals. Those goals are a result of the board's evaluation of my progress on the 8 standards. Right, so I think in that, I know what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's one of those things where you say, well, here's the board's view of your work. Okay, and so of those things, you look and see, well, here are 2 areas or 3 areas we want to make improvement in, so let's build a goal around that set of improvements. And to Anthony's point, also, there is just in getting around, looking around, figuring out what's happening and going through budget cycle, which we haven't done yet. But it's probably going to be more helpful because those goals will be based directly upon the feedback that you all give me based on what you know, what I present. The following year, if you want to do targeted feedback, that would give you more people who are connected to the district to give you a greater view of that, besides just me telling you and just what you have learned. And those are good ways to hear from other people around. And that would help me build the goals better. So, I mean, I could set some, but they would just be based on some things I want to achieve, but those aren't really goals based upon feedback from my employers, my bosses.
Good.
So it's probably better that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the
Yeah.
input, just wanted to
Yeah.
get everyone's thoughts, because I do find it strange, just personally, like,
Mhm.
every year, even in my own evaluation, I set goals, or, I'm sure we all set goals, so it's just strange, a year without goals, and I hear you, I'm pretty sure you have goals, so.
Yeah.
Not much. We're just toasting as the first grade.
You know, if you look at your policy for the superintendent qualifications, those are also some expectations that you had when you were hiring Joe, right? So you kind of have those to kind of go off of too. You know, those are essentially kind of your expectations for Joe's position. But after you do the first one, you'll definitely have a better idea. And I think we'll be able to develop more tailored goals that are going to address, like Joe said, those areas of growth, or, depending on what you identify.
Jen, are you gonna go back to the criterias that you were showing? You were going through
I was gonna just kind of go back, 'cause I think I went really quickly on it, but these are the 8 standards.
I want.
Would you like a printed copy? Would you like a printed copy of the workbook?
I
or-
seen it.
They
before.
emailed, yeah, they were emailed out.
Okay, but we can also print one here too. if you
Yeah,
want.
I seen it. I just want Gustavo to see
Oh.
Yeah.
what's in the criteria. So it's pretty,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So each standard, is like a big theme, but then you have descriptors to help you understand kind of how that standard can get rated. So that will help you. You don't want to rate on each individual descriptor. You're going to use those descriptors to help you give an overall rating of the performance for that specific standard. So yeah, so there's the visionary district leadership, ethics and professional norms, inclusive. And so there it kind of tells you and, develops and maintains a supportive, equitable, cultural, responsive, and inclusive district culture. And so you probably have heard, during public comment, maybe you have some observations. You're absolutely right that with the target feedback survey, you'll get even more insight. But again, given kind of where you're at with your timeline, and I not 100%, but I'm gonna say it's probably gonna be that March deadline, or the March deadline. But yeah, so there's 8 standards, and then you'll get to the one where the board will have the most direct knowledge is standard 8 around policy, governance, and advocacy, because that is your work. And so how you developed relationships, how relationships have been developed, respectful, responsive, everything we talked about in roles and responsibilities last time is going to be covered in this policy, governance, and advocacy piece. And so your communications with the superintendent, things like that.
And the artifacts, do they have under each standard, or how are those two connected?
Yeah, so the artifacts in our workbook, we have a list of artifacts that the superintendent can use. Let me go back and show you that. Under each standard, starting on the appendix C, there'll be a whole list of kind of artifacts that can align with each, and these are just kind of samples. So you can take a look at those to help you kind of determine. I was just trying to tell you that for a first-year superintendent, you may not get all of those artifacts. Would be like, oh, this would be great, but probably not feasible. And so that's why you want to have that conversation of what is feasible, what is something that we will be able to see as an artifact, given how long our superintendent has, been with us. Yeah.
And then another question, when it comes to goals, isn't that connected to board goals?
It's connected to the district goals. Board goals, and we're going to talk about that, is also tied to your performance as a board. So similar to how you have, you have the district goals, which is how you want the expectations that the board has set for how they want to see the district, or where they envision the district in the next 2 to 3 years, depending on how long your strategic plan is. Board goals are just how you evaluate the performance of the superintendent and then set some superintendent goals. You need to evaluate your performance as a board. And I talked about that last time with the board self-assessment survey, evaluation survey, because then from there you can develop some board goals. Okay, what is it that we need to commit to based on kind of our areas of growth that were identified in our evaluation? So it's two pieces. When it comes to accountability, you have to hold the district and Joe's performance accountable, but you also have to hold yourselves as a board, your performance accountable.
Some of the outcomes on prior evaluations were DEI work, team development work, right? Some of those that we had retreats in those regards and so on.
And that's what I would call board goals. And they're tied again to professional development.
And so when are those?
Those are typically created, great question. I was gonna discuss that later, but those are typically created after an evaluation, so board self-assessment survey. So that way you can kind of determine and plan what your professional development, like whether it's trainings, whether you want to commit to, you know, making sure you do a superintendent evaluation each year, whatever that is. But sometimes boards don't have the time and, you know, you don't want to wait. You can create some commitments at least for the school year. And it can either be super informal or formal, like a document with action steps, or just a bulleted list of like, we're going to commit to this. We're going to commit to doing a superintendent evaluation each year. We're going to commit to doing a board self-evaluation of our performance. It really kind of depends on the board, and the self-evaluation is going to be very helpful to help you kind of determine what are the areas that we need to grow in. But if you don't want to wait, you can also create at least some short-term commitments.
And so that's my question. What do we do between now and a self-evaluation? Like, how do we hold each other accountable for the work that we do there?
Is the board evaluation on the same timeline as superintendent and?
No, so this is our first page of it. It's based on 12 standards for the board. It's called the Balanced Governance Standard. We already walked through some of them last time, like accountability, community engagement, vision directed planning. But basically the board would get to take a survey, and it's done anonymously. 84 questions. Each of the questions are tied to each standard. So you take that as a board, and then we at OSBA would compile all of the data. We also don't know who responded, because you self-select, you have a self-identifier when you take the survey. So I have no idea even who took the survey. And then we have a conversation around your results, and kind of this is where I saw disagreement, disalignment, what's happening here. We have an honest, open conversation about, what are the areas of growth and what are the areas of strength for the board. And then you develop a professional development plan based on kind of what it was that was identified after the discussion with the board. And so that's then where board goals get created, or commitments. Sometimes boards prefer to call it commitments, because board goals can get a little confusing with district goals, superintendent goals. And so to kind of differentiate it, it's essentially commitments that you're making to yourselves as a board to address your performance and kind of what you saw in terms of areas of growth and your areas of strength and the assessment that you take as a board.
And when does that happen?
The self-evaluation. There's really no right or wrong time to take it. I've had boards ask me, what if you have new board members? It's it's based on the need, and definitely recommended to do it at least every other year, so that you can review your board goals and revisit and revise them as needed.
When was the last time we did it? We were all together. It was like in 2019.
It was, so when OSBA started using that new standard, you guys only did the short version of it, and that was the last time you guys did it. That was that first year, whatever that first year was. 2019, I think.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend, potentially making this something that you can discuss if the board wants to do, so that you can create some board goals or commitments. Before I jump here though, because I was going to discuss this, and I do want you to kind of come up at least with a list until you decide, you know, what, if you do want to do a board self-evaluation and have a discussion around your results. I want to talk about board operating agreements again, and we're gonna have you do some work, but before I jump into that, any other questions about the superintendent evaluation before I move us to the next topic?
So it sounds like at our next meeting, we'll have all the information. we did. Might be several as far as timeline and the contract dates. And discuss.
For the evaluation of the superintendent. Yeah, and so, please, if you haven't read through the standards, I'm not completely familiar with them, so I'll be going over that between now and then. I'm not sure if you have, but please just take the time to familiarize yourself with it, and any other thoughts you have between now and then, we can have a discussion on how we want this year's evaluation to go. Talk to Joe, come up with a plan. And then we'll know about the contract right into, so we know the dates.
Yeah, you'll figure out all of that, and I would recommend, and I'm happy to help, I would recommend, a new timeline with some dates at least, but, and we can even work with Jenny to kind of figure out what would be good dates to have, you know, the actual evaluation. So you have some homework.
So this would be completed by the next. meeting. That's fine.
It should be adopted. Yeah, I would recommend not waiting any more than your next January board meeting, is having you adopt your timeline. You know, agreeing to your process, agreeing to your criteria, the tool you want to use, if it's OSBA's workbook, and then the timeline.
That only if the March date is effective. If not, then I would assume we would have to rush it.
I would say even if it's June, my recommendation is just do it, because you're ready, you know, as I mentioned, even with the June deadline, you should have had that discussion in August, September, October. And so you're already, you know, a little bit behind. So if it is June, great, because you can have some time to discuss like maybe the timeline you can maybe set aside, but I would not set aside approving the process and the tool you're going to use.
I think personally for me, whether the deadline is March or June, that we should have this figured out by the next board meeting.
Yeah, I was even wondering, like, even if we did have to June, it would even just be better practice to do it in March, just so it aligned with, you know, Joe brought up the point that everyone else is March 15th. But I know this year, maybe we need that time, the additional time, so when we know what that final date is, we can decide next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah. When you know what that final date is, I'm happy to come up with some dates, or Jenny can fill in what are some good dates for the board to have the evaluation.
Thank you.
Based on kind of your already calendared board meetings and everything.
That will be very helpful, then we have to decide the criteria.
Yeah,
Is that for everyone or is it just for probationary folks? Or
Everyone.
everyone?
The evaluation? Or,
No,
March 5th.
oh, gotcha.
Licensed.
But at that end, we review the standards and schedule, so I'll have to look back. But making sure so we can actually have a discussion and agree on what those standards will be in the process.
And agreeing to what tool you want to use to do the evaluation. Yeah. I think you have a plan. Yeah, so Jenny has that electronic, but if you want a hard copy, and you can send that as well. We're all virtual now. I do go into the office about once a month. I'm going to be going in on Thursday. We do have some binded copies when we used to come and do work sessions. So sorry I didn't have a hard copy for you of those, and I'll have to dig where they're at. But we did used to give, and sometimes boards would even request that we give them or mail them like hard copies of the binded workbooks. It's a workbook. It's like 30 pages long.
We have a request for one hard copy. Anybody else? We don't mind making.
I'll take the hard copy.
Okay, I'll send it to the printer, so I'll get it to you before you leave.
that for filling it in or just reviewing?
Just review, but you may want to take notes, and some people want to do it either way. We don't mind making the copies.
I like hard copies for reviewing, but for like actually filling it in, I want to do it.
Yeah,
Yep, and I can either, if you decide to proceed with us, I'll share with Jenny, or even if you don't, I'll share with Jenny the templates of the Word doc or the Excel, so you can decide which one would be best for you to fill out when you're doing your individual ratings. Okay. Great. Well, with that, do you want to take a quick kind of 5-minute break before we dive into the next activity? Maybe 5-10 minutes. How much time do you need?
Just a stretch.
Yeah,
let's do that.
absolutely. Yeah.
I watch it telling you, you have to get up.
Mine too.
I'm doing a good. I always make sure, especially after having a discussion, we take care of ourselves.
kept saying, stand up.
Yeah.
Stop yelling at me.
And then if we're gonna call the meeting back in session.
Right, back in session.
So the next part that I wanted to discuss as part of your transition plan is setting expectations, which I talked a little bit about with the board operating agreement. So if you look at the document that you have in front of you, if you go to the one called example 2 board operating agreement, this is what a board operating agreement is, how I would recommend doing one. So one pager. There's an activity that you walk through to get to this. We're going to skip the board operating agreement and see if we have time. If we have time, we'll jump to it. But I really want to cover the board superintendent operating agreement. So we usually recommend a document for the board operating agreement and then one for if you flip that page over for the board superintendent operating agreement. And really the difference is that the board operating agreement is something that you as a board, you prioritize what areas you want to have in the document. A board operating agreement holds the weight of policy. Essentially, it's prioritizing what may be already in policy, but you need to just make sure that you as a board agree that that's what you hold yourselves, that's how you're going to hold yourselves accountable. It's a great tool too, in case if there is a board member who maybe, is not following the standards and conduct of the board, the chair could have a conversation and utilize this document, say, this is what we agreed to, this is what we, this is our operating agreement and how we're going to communicate, how we're going to operate, how we're going to make decisions, etc. So that's really what a board operating agreement is utilized for. A board superintendent operating agreement is just a way for the board to then set some clear expectations for the superintendent, and then the superintendent to set some clear expectations for the board. Again, it can be around how you operate, how you communicate with each other. That's for you to kind of prioritize, and that's what we're going to do right now. So the way that a board superintendent operating agreement, we're going to do one, we're going to essentially fill one out tonight. Oh, let me share my screen. And I jump to the document. Stop sharing. Here we go. We're going to essentially fill out kind of your own and do an activity right now so that the board can set some expectations for the superintendent. Superintendent, you get a chance to set some expectations for the board. So to do that, I want you to look at this document called Board Superintendent Agreement. So what I want each of you individually to look at this list. This is just a list of kind of some agreements that the board can set for expectations, but also come up with your own. We had a lot of discussions last time around how you operate, how you communicate with Joe, how you receive information from Joe. So if you think of something else, it doesn't have to be what's on this list, but what I want you as an individual board member here in the next 5 to 8 minutes, to prioritize the top 5. Prioritize the top 5 expectations that you want to set for Joe. So just select your top 5. Joe, you're going to look at this other one that says, flip it over, and you're going to prioritize your top 5 based on, superintendent expectations for the board. So now you're going to set some expectations for the board. After you prioritize, you're going to do this individually, but you're going to report it out, and we're going to come to a consensus of kind of what are the top 5, and you're going to create a 1-page document tonight. Any questions? Okay, so prioritize your top 5 board members utilizing this or coming up with your own. And Joe, same. You can utilize this list or come up with or modify or revise the ones that are on there.
We're only picking 5.
Prioritizing the top 5. Yep. or creating your own if you don't see something there. Or modifying. Like a camera is, or with the little boxes, just so that way the board can see the box.
Mhm.
Couple more minutes.
Something Bill said at the conference comes to mind of breathing therapies. A lot of them seem like to be expected and this.
Something who said?
Bill at the conference, always be a conference.
Oh, mhm.
where you would do something just like a given. To be expected and maybe they should.
There's a reason the protocol exists, the board operating. Yeah. And it's sometimes, and like I said, you have a lot of policies, right? I said last time, you have so much. And so how this helps you just kind of prioritize some of those expectations. Okay, so it looks like everybody's ready. So I'm going to start with the first part, which is the board's expectations of superintendent. And I'm just going to go around and see, you know, which one you picked as your top, and then see if anybody else has that. And we're going to have a discussion around it. So we can kind of come and see, you know, did somebody else pick a different one, right? Or did you all pick the same ones? We're going to see what that alignment looks like. So I'll start with you, Anthony. What's the first one that you picked?
2.
Number 2. So that's around respect and acknowledge the board's role in setting policy and overseeing the performance of the superintendent. Who else picked number 2? Board members? Nobody. Okay. And so is there anything you would add to that, or why did you pick that one, Anthony? Can you elaborate?
It's also the board work, and I think the work that we do as a board, or that the superintendent does, acknowledging those differences and focusing on our mission as a school board to set district policy, oversee the performance of the superintendent. It gets to the core of our work.
Okay. All right, we'll put it up here. Nobody else picked it, so we'll see what else, but great, thank you. Let's go with which one did you pick?
I ended up picking 3.
You picked 3, but can you choose one just so we can discuss?
No, as in, that was gonna be 3.
Número 3.
You picked the first one.
Ball rules victory.
Actually, it's 4 or 5.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so number 3, which is work with the board to establish a clear vision for the school district. Why'd you pick that? Speak a little bit as to why.
I mean, aside that, it's one of the things that I know we worked on, but definitely maintaining that we're all working in that same direction. Juntos.
Great. Did anybody else pick that one? Oh, look at that. Okay. So all of you did. I'm just gonna make a note here. Unanimous. Make a note. See what I can remember. Okay. Great. What'd you pick? Number 5. Provide data to the board members so that data-driven decisions can be made. What did you pick there? What's your expectations for that?
I think that regardless of where we stand on opinion, that when we look at data, that we can easily make decisions based on what we see and what's real, as opposed to opinion.
Any other board members pick that one? Provide data to the board members so that data-driven decisions can be made.
I do. Just my understanding that it's also part of the information needed.
For you to make informed decisions on kind of your policies and budget. Okay. Thank you. Laura.
I picked a few. I picked 5.
Right. What was your top? Which one did you pick?
I didn't prioritize
Okay.
by being my top number, whatever.
Mhm.
But I'm always looking for team building. So for me, work towards becoming a team with board members is something that I always look.
Did you pick a number or create?
1.
Oh, number 1. Yep. Work towards becoming a team member with board members. Oh. Did anybody else pick that? Okay. Gustavo.
I picked 4 from the list and then I added one, so I'm gonna share the one I added,
Okay.
see what people's thoughts are on that one. And that is to build a culture of transparency and trust.
To build a culture of transparency and trust. Board members, what do you think of that? That expectation.
I agree.
Great. And then the other one you picked was what, number 4?
From the list, number 7 was one I think.
Let's put that one up there. Inform the board, that's a good one. Inform the board of all critical information, including relevant trends, anticipated adverse media coverage, or critical external or internal change. Did any other board members pick that? Okay. 4. Great. Is there anything you want to add to that? Like kind of why, what kind of expectations do you have around that?
Just so we're and being informed, not being caught off guard with like critical information that we should know, be aware of.
Can I add that to that one? I thought about adding number 9, which is just, in a promptly and effective manner.
Just adding to it.
Yeah. That's how I noted it. It was, I combined both.
Put it right next to it. So would you say maybe inform the board in a promptly and effective manner of all critical information? Okay. Effective. Okay. Thank you. What else? Now let's go back to Anthony. What's another one that you picked that hasn't been already selected?
2, 3 was done already, right? Yeah. 4.
Prepare preliminary goals annually for the board's consideration. We kind of started having that discussion. So what was your expectation for that one? Why'd you pick that?
Going back to, we hired an executive to lead this organization, and the expectation is that they understand the organization, the system, the structure better than we do with board members, better than we will ever with board members. And so having their feedback come first is what it was.
Any other boards have anything to add to what Anthony just said? Okay. What's another one that you said that hasn't been said yet?
15.
15. Represent the school district by being visible in the community. You want to elaborate on that further?
Again, district being a heart of the community, having someone that is out there and face, kind of really bridge and create those connections and have a good relations with families. Like for me, an extension of trying to again get family participation to the schools as well.
Yes. Thank you. What else did you pick?
I selected number 10. I actually combined 9 and 10 together.
Okay.
So 10 is distributed on the board agenda, and I think that it's really important for us to review the agenda prior, which includes the presentation, and be prepared for what we do have that workshop, that board meeting. And so I know at one point it was on Wednesdays, and then it got moved to Thursdays, and then they got moved to Fridays. It's mostly been Fridays now, but I think, at least for me, I review the entire agenda, and that's important.
So what would you want? What are you proposing then? Like, when would it need to be distributed
I
by?
think it's distributed I think we're really pretty consistent on Fridays. I think sometimes new information gets added, like on that Monday or Tuesday, and I don't have a chance to review that information. And for me, if you're adding a PowerPoint slide or, somebody's presenting or, they're adding something new, I want to review it.
Okay. Did other board members select that one? Or do you have anything to add to what, no, Emmy has said?
I didn't select it, but I did read through it and was like, I'm not sure that we have it as defined like it is here. So it's nice to see that someone's thought about it. I know that we are kind of consistent the way we do it. It's just not like written. But it just wasn't a top 5, so I didn't.
I guess my question that I would ask with that one, based on kind of what I presented last time is, do you feel like you don't have enough time to review the materials? Do you feel like your meetings are jam-packed, your agendas are jam-packed? And, I guess in terms of, your operations, is this something that needs to get prioritized?
What I seen is that it's been a couple of times we have to re-adopt the agenda when we come to meetings and adding another subject to it. And then if you ask me, when do I have time? I make time because my days are packed, and then including the weekends because of when we visit communities. So just it's important that we don't pack the agendas because then we leave the building around 10 when we started at 5:45, and we all have families and kids that go to school the next day. So to me, it's not fair that we get to stay a very long time and we do things. So we were keeping agendas for the meetings for running it for 2 hours. And when we consider the agenda and stuff, so again, we keep revising it again, we're packing the agenda, just to make it short and nice and sweet, so we will have time to discuss, we will have time to go over the materials and not feeling like, we have to rush people out of the building. And as we have to go back to our kiddos.
My first year on the board, we would regularly go till 11.
11.
So
Yeah.
midnight.
Marathon meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, so, having this type of agenda and, now that we revised it and that we are trying to have a model and to be like having a regular base to send us the agenda and having enough time, to me, from Friday to Tuesday, like I said, if I have a week or if I have 4 days, I will make time to read the materials, to revise the agenda. So if we don't pack the agenda, we'll be fine. We just keep it like we keeping it like it's not light, but it's less than what we used to.
So I know, do you remember the conversation I had with you where I presented your agenda and asked, when you're looking at reports, making sure that they do get tied to the district goals? I know you're still working on vetting that process, but making sure that whatever it is you are going to make action items does pertain to the board. It's something that you need to hear in terms of the reports. As an observer, and then I want to ask this question is, are your work sessions typically combined with a lot of other like action items like tonight and public comment? That's something that as a third party observer, when it comes to work sessions, we do recommend there be work sessions because it's important for the board to kind of focus and have time to do trainings or focus on stuff. And then during work sessions, typically, it's not a best practice to have public comment. It is up to you for the board, but I'm just going to give you, based on my observations, working with you these couple of times. And again, I don't know if this has always been your practice, but have your work sessions always included additional items? And like tonight's, for example, is that typically what your work sessions look like?
About 60 or 70%.
Yeah. So when it comes to developing the agenda, so you have your regularly board, and this is something that in July, you want to make sure you talk about when you're doing your organizational planning meeting, is scheduling your regular board meetings and then scheduling your work sessions. And that's why a self-evaluation can be really useful as a tool, because then you can kind of figure out, okay, what is it that we need to focus on? So what kind of work sessions should we be planning throughout the year as a board to improve, to continuously improve our board professional development? Or, you know, if we want to look at data more, how can we add that into a work session instead of making it a part of your board meeting? So it's really important that you look at how you're structuring and having a conversation about your board meetings and then also your work sessions. My recommendation for board meetings, that's where you should have your action items, public comment. Work sessions is more diving into a specific topic or area, whether that's looking at data with the district leadership team and with Joe, or, you know, doing a training. So that would be kind of based on my observations that I wanted to ask before I assume. What I would look at is how you're structuring and using your time, you know, efficiently and effectively as possible.
And sometimes we get lost because there's so many things coming at us, and
Right.
that our brújula or our focus should, you know, we will always go back to that, right? To our strategic,
Oh, yeah.
to our goals, right,
Uh-huh.
as a district. So
Yep.
how is that looking
Mm-hmm.
in as a board? How is that looking like in our teachers, right? In
Mhm.
the superintendent and community?
Right. That's the kind of reports you should be receiving, right? And tying it back to those big overarching goals that you set as a board, the direction that you're setting for the district. And so that's your opportunity during the board meetings to hear how things are progressing. Yeah.
If we're moving the needle, right?
Yep. I'm gonna leave it up here. And I just added the Friday prior, so that way you just have it, and we'll discuss if you want to keep it or not as a priority. Yes.
On that note about like general session versus work session, is there guidelines, like you mentioned, work session should be more focused? Maybe we eliminate public comment and not have as many action items. As far as like time, like would work sessions typically be a bit shorter than general sessions, just because we're going to be focused and we're not going to, or would you say?
So it varies. Your work sessions, which again, you want to kind of plan out throughout the year. So that's why the July organizational meeting is a great time for the board to kind of determine when they're going to have work sessions. It can vary. Some boards will have it for 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. It really depends. If you're having a training with us at OSBA, we'll let you know, like, we need 3 hours for roles and responsibilities training. So you can kind of plan that out. I will say work sessions are essentially a special meeting. But they're planned out. Sometimes you may have to have a special meeting, and so you won't have those calendars. I will say that. But it honestly kind of really depends, you know, based on the need. So I hear what Laura's saying too, in terms of, you know, things come up. There's so many things, and we know that the past 2 years, a lot of things got, you know, added to your plates for you to look at and make decisions on. So it is gonna vary, but it's just important that you as a board set some expectations. And that's what we say each year, have this conversation with your board around, you know, and during the July planning organizational meetings is a great time to look at that. Yeah. Great question. Based on the time, I just want to make sure I got everyone's priorities. What other ones are not listed up here that you selected? Let's just have you each kind of tell me the numbers and I'll just write them down.
I did 14 and 15.
14 and 15. So that is conduct a self-assessment and represent the school district. Okay. Annabelle, did you have any additional ones that aren't listed on here?
No.
Okay.
I had number 16, but that was my option number 6.
Number 16?
Yeah. Because the other ones were, was the same ones that my board picked. 3, 4, and 7, mine was 1, 15, another, and then the last one, yeah, I think it was 16.
16 was the one that you haven't said. Okay. No, Emmy, did you have any additional ones that haven't been listed yet?
No, I still have number 16.
Okay. And then
Oh,
Gustavo.
sorry, I do have one, number 13.
Communicate with individual board members if there's a problem.
I thought that was related to number 16, but maybe it's not.
Provide follow-up information. It can be.
I think I saw number 16 as, you know, like, if I ask a question or something happening in the community, that there's no follow-up in this.
I have seen boards where they'll combine it. So making sure, you know, there's that piece of communicating with the individuals and then closing the loop if you can. Gustavo, did you have any additional ones that haven't been listed yet?
It was 16.
Oh, a lot of you chose 16. Okay. Okay, so you have a big list here, as you can see. I will say all of you chose this one, work with the board to establish a clear vision for the school district. So I would definitely recommend you keep that one. The rest are kind of, oops, let me delete this.
Number 4 was also very popular. Number 7 was popular. 3, 4,
4 and 5, prepare preliminary. Yep. And number 7, inform the board of all critical information. Yeah. And this one, number 6 that's listed here, and number 7 on your work document, aligns a lot kind of with the 16 and the ones down here. You know, informing the board promptly and effectively of critical information, including trends, communicate to individual board members. I mean, that's kind of essentially what that's saying. So if a problem is, I could see that getting combined. That would be my recommendation, is maybe combining these 3 right here with number 6.
You mean 7, 13, and 16?
Yes,
Well, she has them numbered up there different.
Oh, okay.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was looking at that.
yeah, I have them. Don't look at, yeah. Oops. So I would recommend combining kind of these because they're very, very similar, and kind of figuring out how to combine those together. So it's all around informing and communication.
Information.
It's all around communications, and so that's why I would bundle them together. So you're starting to see kind of themes that you have created.
Inform, communicate. Information, follow up.
I would say building a culture, that's part of also working as a team. So I would also bundle these two. I'm just trying to show you how they kind of align and how I'm starting to create themes so that you can kind of create 5. Community, this is kind of its own separate, which I know that's something that you are interested in learning more about, is representing the school district being visible in the community. I'm going to delete this one because we already have addressed that. And then conduct. Okay. So here's what we have left. So now we've narrowed it to 10. Oops, this one got listed twice. We have 9. So conduct a self-assessment. I mean, that's something that I've heard you all wanting to be interested in that you haven't done. So that might be something that you want to commit to, is conducting a self-assessment prior to the board's evaluation of the superintendent's job and performance.
And this is the superintendent conduct itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is more to the superintendent evaluation. Yeah, so is this something that needs to be prioritized or, you know, that you need to remind yourself to do each year? Or is this something that you already have it in policy and it's not necessarily something you need to prioritize? Unless you feel that you never discuss your process, kind of like what we walked through. If you want that to be an expectation, then that could be an expectation, but essentially it's in your policy as well.
I'd say we can exclude it.
Everybody agree?
I mean, if it's already in policy. I don't see why it should be.
It's essentially saying that he will conduct his own self-evaluation before you do your, I would agree. The other ones are just around respect and acknowledge the board's role in setting policy and overseeing the performance of the superintendent. Which kind of goes with culture. But it is a little bit different. That's more about individual roles and responsibilities, providing data, community, and the last one is about your structure, the structure kind of your agendas. So what do you think based on the list you see there? What would you prioritize? Or do you want to keep all of them? That's also a discussion you can have. You don't necessarily have to have just 5.
If you gave us 16, we'll come up with that.
And I think
You
you
can
can
find
find something that the superintendent respect our role. I mean, that can create conflict and what we want to do.
Many of these are given, right?
Mhm.
That's why it was.
And that's why you presented what Bill said.
You know,
Yeah.
by talking
True.
to Gustavo, I go, this is a given, right? This is what is happening, right? That was what I see from my superintendent, right? So, you know, but how, so, okay, prioritize from this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we can eliminate the first one.
You all agree? Do you agree, Anthony? Because you picked this one.
I think it's fine, whatever the board wants. For me, it was just getting back to like this meat and bones of what we do.
If it makes you feel better, one of the ones I chose is very similar to that. the other way around. So, I mean, just got the policy, budget.
If you read number 4, it goes back to the same of number 1, right? We're talking about the culture, the transparency, the trust, you know, working together. That means respect, right? When we cannot build a team if we don't have trust, you know? So, yeah.
Or maybe we can find a way to include some of those pieces that combine.
Respect.
Combine all these with
Mhm.
the first one here.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And that's kind of what I talked about last time, right? In order to understand your roles, you need to understand your roles and responsibilities so that you can collaborate, work as a team. And all of that is built on trust. If there's no trust, you're not gonna be able to collaborate. You're not gonna be able to build a relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
So 7. Good. I think this one needs a little bit more discussion, your agendas. I know we discussed a little bit, but is it necessary or you're essentially sticking to what you've already stuck to, which is the Friday prior. I think more something that you will end up having a bigger discussion on when you create your board operating agreement. That's where you can talk about marathon meetings. That's where you can talk about your operations, because this is more about how you operate your board operating agreement. This is just setting expectations for Joe. Joe's going to do the same and set expectations for you. In your operating agreement, which we're not going to get the time to do, that's where you could really discuss kind of how are your meetings going? Are they marathon meetings and the expectations? And maybe you can even talk about the agenda as part of that. Agenda and even minutes sometimes get brought up with boards during operations. But we can keep it if you feel that that's a priority you want to give for Joe is to distribute the board agenda by Friday. Remember, this is expectations for the superintendent, not expectations for the board. So also I want to make sure you are aligning your expectations there.
I think numbers, for me, number 7, it's another given, because we already are in the habit of having it on Friday. As long as we don't change and we go back and discuss it, discuss what's going on. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think we shared our thoughts about it, and so if we need to change it, we can next summer. We'll talk about it one day, so we can remove it from this list.
The board agree? Okay.
The only one that I feel uncomfortable about is providing data to the board. I think it's really easy to cross the line of making data-driven decisions. That's not our superintendent's role. And so you can really easily go down the rabbit hole of requesting data, wanting to make decisions operationally, and that's not. I feel really uncomfortable with that one.
Mhm. Now, maybe the board could potentially align it with the district goals, right? And what is your role, right? In terms of looking at data. So I've heard some board members express that they want to see more data, but I think you need to have a conversation as a board as to what data does the board need to see and stay in their role. I love that you say that, stay within their role of governance. Because you don't want to look at those, Joe is looking at really detailed data. You're going to be look at more high level data, systemic data, looking at trends, hearing about, but tying it to the district goals, which is your role as a board to set that direction for the district.
Okay, are we moving the needle? How many kids have graduated? How many kids have really succeeded? To the next level of, violence and higher education, CTE, and so on. So because that's up.
For me, the data piece may tie into transparency, and it's not so much for us to make the decision, but to justify decision-making being done by the district. So how they're using data to make decisions and evaluate outcomes.
This would be my recommendation, but again, you get to decide as a board. Kind of altering this one and being very specific as to your role as a board. So provide relevant data to the board members so that they can make informed decisions on policy, budget, etc., tying it more to your specific role. If you feel strongly that you do want to make sure data is not something that you as a board want to set as an expectation for Joe and his team.
And what about our strategic, is that we can leave it out, it's a given. And number 3, to provide relevant data, I don't know if they,
Tied to the strategic goals.
yeah.
You can say something like that. Or you can say,
So that's our role, right? Yeah, about the strategic, and that's our work with very particular, right, with our superintendent.
yeah, usually what we recommend for the strategic planning process is that the board sets the direction collaboratively with the superintendent and folks at the district level, students, parents, community members even, to come up with those big goals, overarching focus areas. Then the superintendent creates a strategic plan of how it's going to meet those focus areas. Then the board gets to receive updates throughout your board meetings on updates on the progress of the strategic plan. And Joe gets to decide what part of the strategic plan, to report on. Then the board can also have work sessions where they actually dive into data that's tied to the district goals that they set, where they can have questions and actually see how progress is being made on the district goals. So it's essentially 2 separate things.
So for example, college and career readiness, that's tied to our students graduating, our students going to college.
Mhm.
That's data, right?
Yeah. And we do recommend that the board select data when they're done with the strategic, once you've established your district goals, once the superintendent has done the strategic plan, the board selecting one piece of data that they want to see progress on. And that's where you would then have a work session with Joe, his team, to ask questions and be able to see how progress is being made on the district goals. So not on the strategic plan, but on the district goals. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like we're everywhere
Yeah,
and we're not like,
aligned.
yeah, like a metaphor, I see ourselves, some of us inside, some of us outside, some of us walking along the line, but nothing, like everybody is walking together towards the same goal. Like everybody has their own agendas when we come together to boards, or, so.
What
it's
do you
like-
mean about own agendas?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like, I don't know, I feel like, we're just scratching, deeper to see what we find. And sometimes we don't even see it, like the public comment today, right? And so on and so forth. So that's how I see it, so when we are talking about, we're here because of our students. I see everybody in different areas, I see a couple of people in the same line, but then I see everybody else, and then in terms of the work that we're supposed to be doing, I guess, all over the place. Let's focus, we have to be working with this and this and that. And it's good to learn but that's not what we were supposed to be doing, right? So sometimes I feel like, really, this is, this is the 2 hours we spend,
And again, I think that goes back to what I mentioned, like our board goals. We don't have goals. I don't think we have goals. And if we did create goals, I don't think we do them ever. And so, that's a lot of what's lacking is, again, which is connected to accountability. Like, how do we keep ourselves accountable?
Yeah.
I don't think that we do.
Yeah. And that's, I honestly, just after having conversations these past 2 work sessions, is something I see as a need in your board, is just an evaluation of yourselves. And then having an honest, having a discussion around the results. And maybe out of those things will pop up, and they probably will. More than likely they will pop up in the results. And that's kind of exactly what that, all those standards will have all of that. There's one even called vision directed planning. There's one called the roles of the board. So, that is something that I think your board does need to have. You're not going to have a discussion, have a self-assessment and see kind of where you're at, and then develop some board goals around that.
I mean, I honestly thought these 2 sessions were going to be on that. Because to me, if we can't function as a board, like, how are we going to create this plan with the superintendent? Like, if we can't figure out what we're doing and what we need to do, how then are we going to focus on, district goals? So, I mean, to wait until the spring to do evaluations, I guess, to plan on it for the following year. And that's why I'm asking, what do we do between now and then?
You can plan to have a self-evaluation as a board. It is, I will say, a little bit unfortunate that you didn't start this transition plan in September, when you're supposed to in September, even October, sometimes November, but it's mostly done during the summer, the transition plan. And I know there's a lot of different factors in that, but it is important to, talk about your systems and whatnot. And during and to have retreats, board retreats. If you don't have board retreats, that's a great time to have, spend time to do a self-evaluation, spend time to do some team bonding. There's a lot that can be done. Have you done board retreats? You have done board
One in
retreats.
the summer. I think
Yeah.
the part of the problem is 2 of us are new. So we're getting caught up with things. There's three of us
Yeah.
here that have been around.
Yeah.
That are more familiar with some of the things that we're doing, but as a whole, we're kind of still kind of like Laura was alluding to, kind of figuring things out on our own. I think for this next month, we have our work kind of defined. We need to meet next time and figure out the evaluation for the superintendent, but
Yeah.
if the board is open to it, then the next focus item could be the self-evaluation. We don't need to wait till the end of the year if that's a priority. As far as kind of goal setting, that's how been on my mind as chair. And I've talked to Joe about it and others. It is a priority, and I think that we should talk about it. But kind of the hold up with that has been, we have the strategic plan process happening at the same time. So it's kind of like, let's wait on that so that then we can use that to inform our goal setting. So that's part of, but I mean, we could do a board evaluation in parallel and then meet at the end and use that to inform our goals.
So I will say how I've done it with other boards. They've applied to our program because they, sometimes need a little bit of either training because they have new board members. We have a program called the Diana Tiff Memorial Scholarship Program. I'm actually working with the board right now where we did first an evaluation and they developed some board goals and now they're working on the strategic plan process. But it's okay if you're starting the flip side away. The thing I would recommend is just, having that conversation of what is it that your board needs. So based on what I'm hearing, I think you should, once you're done with the evaluation, is schedule a time to do a self-evaluation as a board. And, contracting with OSBA to help you do that and have a facilitated discussion. Because it's really the facilitated discussion that's going to have you develop, be able to create kind of your professional development plan and address your areas of need, your areas of growth as a board.
So let me know how you all feel about this, but we can meet in January and define, what we're going to define with the superintendent evaluation timeline. And then that gives us some time to kind of figure out how we want to proceed with the board evaluation. And then, at the end, once we've defined that process, we can start to think about scheduling that for us. Does that work for everyone?
And then I'll just say for the transition plan, sorry if there was a miscommunication, but that's usually where, the superintendent evaluation needs to get discussed in the process. And again, usually we do TPs in the summer, sometimes early fall. And, afterwards, there usually are discussions around a self-assessment, and then you can do that before the board, the superintendent evaluation. So you're not wrong, but I would say it still doesn't, again, there isn't no right time. We don't have like a deadline for when you should do the self-evaluation. It doesn't matter if you have new board members, if you have experienced board members, it's just making sure that you're doing it at least every other year and having that discussion around your board goals and your performance. Because like I said, in terms of accountability, you're holding this, you have now a process, or you're going to have a process now for how you're evaluating the superintendent. How are you evaluating your performance as a board?
For just like planning purposes, or February, March, busy in terms of action items for the board.
Well, the budget process starts, I think whatever the calendar is. That's it's not okay, so we're probably okay.
The only thing in March is the meetings are flipped because of we have to renew the contract before March 15th. So we have the regular meeting the first time, and then we have the work session the fourth Tuesday.
Okay, so we can work with those 2 months to try and schedule board evaluation, board goal setting.
So that would be in the work session. So.
February.
The work session following, whatever one, whichever one we're going to do in January. Would that be February?
Yeah, so February 7 is the work session. Regular meetings the 28th.
It's plan
On the 7th.
I will just say, don't overwhelm yourself because if your evaluation, look at your timeline, which you'll have next time, right? Look at your timeline, make sure you aren't rushing. I wouldn't want you to rush through the superintendent evaluation and then jump right into the evaluation. Although now you've identified that you do want to commit to a board self-evaluation. So figuring out when is a good time to do that. Maybe you can start having a discussion. Maybe you can have a discussion, like a preliminary discussion next time after you see your timeline for the superintendent evaluation. Because we also don't want you to just rush into it, but good that you are committing and you're agreeing that it's a need. Okay, I do want to though ask Joe for his expectations of the board. What numbers did you pick, Joe? Or did you add some new ones?
1 through 16. No. I actually added one, and I'll start with that one. That's to maintain a focus on policy, budget, and the governance role of the board. The second one was number 2, which is a willingness to share the success and failures of the school system with the superintendent. We're all in this together. Number 3 would have been number 6, which is a willingness to acknowledge and follow the chain of command of the school district. Number 4, efforts to foster unity, harmony, and open communications within the board.
I'm just writing down the numbers so that the board can kind of look along.
And then the last one was number 15, which was the practice of avoiding surprise items at board meetings.
Board, what do you think of that list? So he picked, he created his own, to maintain focus on, the board will maintain focus on policy, budget, and their governance role. He picked number 2, which is willingness to share the success and failures of the school system with the superintendent. Number 6, which is willingness to acknowledge and follow the chain of command of the school district. Number 10, effort to foster unity, harmony, and open communication between the board. And then number 15, practice of avoiding surprise items at board meetings.
So we had a lot of time, so I did that side too. And I have also selected 2 and 6.
And Joe, for number 6, willingness to acknowledge and follow the chain of command, just so the board's aware, are you talking about like public complaints? What kind of chain of command?
Anything, and I think, this board has done this exceptionally well. I think it's nice to have a clarity so other people know too. So people come to a board member and say, well, I want to complain about this, this, and this. And well, have you spoken with your child's teacher? Have you spoken with the principal? Have you to go back through that command? We have a process for that, because if it gets to a place where they need to hear that complaint at a higher level, at board level, then they're not getting all this previous information, and they can, do their governance role on that, or the judicial role. So, and also sending them back, and it's happened many times. I've had many board members say, "Hey, person contacted me. They're upset about X, Y, or Z. We talk to them," and that's the way we're going to continue to do that, so we can do the operational part. So.
Great.
And part of it about putting it here for me is, again, also alerting the public to saying the board does this, they're going to send them back this way. If it doesn't get resolved at district level, then that's when it comes. But we don't start here and then go back down the way.
Yeah. Any other additional comments to the expectations that Joe selected?
I didn't talk too much about each one. You want to do quickly? I'm trying to watch the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I chose the number 10 because it's important. It's important for me, and I think it's important for you, and it's important in our community that our board communicates. You don't all have to be best friends, but you just have to listen and operate like a board. And so having that open conversation among and between yourselves, it's important, just board culture. Because that also, allows us to work together, and allows you to work together, and so that our community knows that we're all on the same page. And then the practice of avoiding surprise items, I think it's the same for you. You don't want me to bring a bunch of surprise items either at the last minute. It's the same way. So I think that was no surprises shows up, and I think in all of them, it's don't spring surprises is the first in your example one. So that was kind of a no-brainer. But
No, and we discussed it last time. I'll just add, how important it is to, make sure that you communicate and that you have a process even for how items are going to be placed on the agenda and your expectations are clear. That's kind of what that ties to as well. And that's how you would avoid surprise. Similar to also, I'll tie just quickly because we were talking about superintendent evaluation. That's why this check-in meetings are going to be really helpful so that Joe doesn't have any surprises in terms of, oh, you didn't present this survey or this artifact or this, and you're like, whoa, you didn't tell me that, so that's what I mean in terms of just tying it back so that you can put it into action and more into a practical manner. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll send this document, I'll brush it up based on kind of what I heard, combining some of them so that you as a board can review one more time, looking at a clean doc. And then you should adopt this, at your next board meeting or a future board meeting. And it's once it's adopted, then it will hold the weight of policy. And then I would recommend you also do a board operating agreement. And that one is a little more different. That one, when I do it, when I facilitate it, there are some examples on the first page, similar to the list that you looked at. There's 15 examples of some operating agreements to just kind of help you. I also have an activity sheet called kind of a list of things for you to say, yes, it's a concern, no, it's a concern, yes, it's a concern, to kind of help you think of ideas of what do you need to prioritize and be a part of your operating agreement. A great example of what it will end up looking like is example 2 here. So you should be identifying what are the big areas, whether it's communications, operations. These can change. It really just depends based on how you go through the process, and it can be facilitated by us. I can also talk to Joe, the chair, and Jenny, and kind of walk them through the process and have them just do it at your next work session. It's really up to the board if they want to do it themselves or have us facilitate it. But that one is a lot different, where I would have you go through an activity, we'd have it mapped out. I'd bring some flip charts, and I would kind of capture big themes, and then we'd come up with some agreements. You as a board come with some agreements that tie to those big themes that you selected. You kind of come up with like narrowing 3 big themes. So it's a lot different. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and wrap us up here because I only have until 8:45. No, we covered a lot. I just want to end with kind of, because I know this is an area, what are you going to commit to next as a board? So I heard you're going to have a discussion around your board self-evaluation. I know you are in the process of your district goals or setting the direction, which I kind of already talked to you about. I'm happy to send this, but this is kind of the process that we have. I didn't get a chance to walk you through it, but that's okay. So with that, that concludes the superintendent transition program. Do you have any additional questions for me? I was going to have you do a fun little icebreaker activity at the end because with work sessions, as I mentioned last time, especially with team building, and you can do these in retreats, it's important to get to know each other at an individual level. And so spending just a little bit of time, we're not going to do it, but spending just a little bit of time, kind of sharing. Actually, we do have some time. So just share, your holiday traditions or something you love about December, just to wrap this up. And kind of on a high note, we can just quickly go around the room. What's a holiday tradition you have?
Doing the posada.
Yeah, so los convivios, whether it's posada or just getting together with others, the point is getting together and it's a moment to strengthen those relationships.
So, I would just say, with family at the beach.
Ooh, you go to the, you escape the cold.
That's my tradition every year.
Nice,
My family at the beach.
great.
I'd say going out and picking a Christmas tree, like different farms that are around here, and then taking it home and decorating.
Then the kids will let her put them in their pajamas, and drive around and see the
Mhm.
different lights all over neighborhoods. Hopefully they would fall asleep, but they often don't.
Yeah,
Hoping.
nice.
We do I get together with one of my cousins and his family. We do like an annual gingerbread, either house or this year we did a man contest. And we pick names of who our partner's gonna be, and then we pick themes. And then we blast them on social media to have people pick a winner. So we did that this past
Oh,
Sunday.
that's so cool. Do you want to share what you do as a tradition?
I think everything I heard, we are snapshots of what we do as well, family time, decorating the tree, going out, seeing the lights, enjoying all the scenes that, holidays kind of things like that. So I'm doing it as a family.
Eat tamales.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. We celebrate Noche Buena, the 24th or 25th. Yeah, state 24th. And then for me, a new tradition I have now started since 2020 is right after Thanksgiving, we pick our tree and then we decorate, put Christmas movies, make cookies, just start the holidays, right off the bat. And then I also this year decided to do a Christmas card for the first time. So we're gonna keep that up as well.
A Christmas.
A Christmas card. Yeah, so that way I can send it out to friends and families. It's what, my partner and, yeah.
That's a big one from 1 year.
That's been our tradition.
Everything parts from your family.
Okay, well, with that concludes your transition program. I hope you found the sessions valuable, and, my encouragement is just continue having these conversations, have that self-evaluation, develop some goals, and, make sure you stay within your role of policy and governance. And reach out to me, reach out to, OSBA if you have any questions. Poke around our website. We have a lot of great resources, but this goes, any board member can reach out to me. It doesn't have to be the chair, it doesn't have to be Joe, it doesn't have to be Jenny, although board secretaries usually do reach out to us. Reach out to me if you want to have a conversation. Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Take care. Happy holidays. I hope you all have a great.
Yes, well, trying to. Usually this is my last meeting and so December.
I'll keep it short, I promise.
And I'll send you the board off.
Okay.
The superintendent. Great. Yeah, there's me.
No, we're almost there.
We expect this question.
And
Sing it loud again. Silly Christmas song is one of the ones.
Next on the agenda is the board calendar. Our next meeting is gonna be January 10th, so the new year. And it's gonna be a work session, and we know what we're gonna be working on. And I think we can do it. I believe in us, so just get some rest, spend some good time with your families and the holidays, and then do your homework, because we'll want it to be interactive and we want to take everyone's input, so. It's, just worthwhile for everyone. And then we have the regular board meeting, end of the month, January 24th.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Next up is future agenda items. I don't see anything listed. Does anyone have anything?
We can have our agenda for the journal. The last agendas. We having superintendent evaluation, we have our evaluation, we have our goal setting, we have our operating agreement, so we're probably gonna have plenty of. things to
January.
talk maybe
We'll
April.
we'll have strategic plan coming in after that at some point too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then we have, we also have, starting in April, we're gonna be doing, budget, right? The budget. Budgets until May.
And along the way, we'll probably start to bring some policy revisions that have come from OSBA, so we've got a stack of those that will,
Already?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
most of them are just changes based on the law, so we probably won't do too much additional work on them.
So be ready for 2023. All right, so we're almost done. Let's move on to executive session now.
All right,
Can you state the ORS?
Okay, moving on to executive session, ORS 192.662D. To conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations.